So I have been informed that we have a quorum. Winchester Town Meeting is now in order. I'd like to welcome back the clerk of the meeting, Mary Ellen Marshall, although I don't know where she is. Before we begin tonight, I just want to take a minute to recognize a couple people who have contributed in great ways to the town of Winchester. Deborah Boyle, or Miss Debbie, as she is known to generations of Winchester ballet dancers, opened Ballet Arts Center in Winchester in the VFW Hall on River Street in 1990. From there, her school grew and she moved, eventually opening up on where she is now on Cross Street. A graduate of Winchester High School, she is retiring after 35 years of teaching and inspiring young people in our town and introducing them to the ballet arts. So on behalf of the town of Winchester, I just want to recognize Debbie Boyle. The other person, I've been waiting all town meeting for him to stand up and take the microphone, but he hasn't. So I'm going to take this opportunity to recognize Lance Grenzebach, our Citizen of the Year for 2025. Lance has served on the planning board, the select board, the town meeting for 16 years, Capital Planning Committee, Town Manager Selection Committee, Town Manager Climate Action Plan Committee, Town Meeting Communications Study Committee, and the Zoning Review Advisory Committee. The celebration will be held on May 27th at Red Lock Farm. I don't know why I'm standing so close to the microphone. Tickets are available on the Winchester Chamber of Commerce website. Now for everybody's favorite part of the meeting, my football analogy. Tonight we will continue where we left off on Monday. We hope to complete the financial articles and get back to the bylaws as part of the body's long overdue review of the existing town bylaws. I'm not making any predictions, but this is, this is where we are. We're very close. We're very close, so hopefully, again, no promises. Longtime town meeting members are used to hearing from the personnel board late in the last night of town meeting. This year is a little different. I'm pleased to introduce Peter Chimetz, chair of the personnel board, to prime time. So this is Article 33. Do you have the motion?
All right, so can you hear me? All right, everybody stole my first line. I was going to tell everybody who's been here for a long time that after we take this vote, we can't leave. For all you folks who are new, tough. Okay, so this should be an easy one, I think. We have, I think, 4 motions, and I don't see any buttons here. Okay, let's see how we figure this out. Okay, there we are. Oh, it's really close. All right. So we have 4 motions. The first motion is going to be for, and I'll go through these in detail, but the first 2 motions relate to the salary increase for the non-union employees. First is the increase. Second is paying for it. Motion 3 will be related to a classification and compensation study for non-union workers, and finally, motion 4 is when we put away the money because we haven't settled any of the contracts. Okay, so motion 1, as I said, is a 2.5% increase for the non-union workers. This is identical to the amount we gave them last year. This will take effect with the new fiscal year starting on July 1st this year, and the overall cost of this COLA is $274,985. Personnel board recommends favorable action on this and every other one, so if I forget to say it, we're favorable to all this stuff. Okay. This motion 2 is the actual increase itself. This is funding the increases, so $230,635 is raised from tax levy. That's part of the money that we voted. $10,050 will be transferred from water and sewer to pay for increases within the enterprise fund, and $34,300 will be transferred from the recreation program receipts into the recreation enterprise to pay for non-union employees there. Motion 3 is to set aside $100,000 for a comprehensive study of how much of the compensation and the classification of non-union employees within the town of Winchester, and comparing that to towns that surround us or are comparable to us. The value of that that we're setting aside, we don't have a quote yet, but the value that we are setting aside is based on a recent similar study by the town of Concord. Finally, is the allocation that we put aside to the unallocated. It's an allocation to the unallocated wage account for FY26 to cover any increases in expenses that we will incur in FY26 in later years based on contracts that are settled at a later time. So I'm assuming there are a few people here that this is a new concept to, or they're new to the town meeting. But we are at the turnover point. I believe all of the contracts are either ending in July or end last July. I've lost count because they so do not match up when they're supposed to. But we are now in that process in which contracts should have been settled, contracts are not settled. At some point they will be settled, there will be payments retroactive, sometimes that can be year payments. And what we do to deal with that is that we set aside a certain amount of money to pay for what we expect to be the contract settlement price. And that's it. I will leave the first slide up so that you see an overview of what you're voting on, and I assume you're going to go through them now one by one. Right?
Yep. Yes. Can we get the recommendation from the select board?
Again, I don't need the microphone. Select board recommended favorable action on all 4 motions.
Thank you.
I can just stand up and speak. Jeff can do the same.
Finance committee?
Finance committee recommends favorable action on all 4.
Okay, thank you. So now I'll read through the motions as loudly as I possibly can. Motion 1 is moved and seconded that the town's compensation schedule be amended to fund proposed 2.5 COLA effective July 1st, 2025, as recommended by the town manager and the personnel board, as set forth in Appendix A. Proposed FY26 non-union municipal compensation schedules, proposed 2.5% COLA, July 1st, 2025, on Schedule 2, CS compensation schedule, FY26, Schedule 3, PT compensation schedule, FY26, Schedule 4, management compensation schedule, FY26, Schedule 5, compensation schedule, FY26, and Schedule 6, recreation compensation schedule, R grades, FY26. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes. Motion 2 is moved and seconded that the town appropriate the sum of $274,985 to various FY26 municipal personal services budgets as listed below, to fund a 2.5% COLA for non-union municipal employees effective July 1st, 2025. $230,635 shall be raised on the tax levy. $10,050 shall be transferred from water and sewer retained earnings, and $34,300 shall be transferred from recreational retained earnings. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Motion 3 is moved and seconded that the town appropriate and transfer the sum of $100,000 from free cash to fund a compensation and classification study for all municipal non-union positions. I see a town meeting member rising. Do you have a question?
Yes.
Okay. This would be a good time for it.
Just yell from there, I guess.
Sorry, Brian McCarthy, Precinct 4, through you to either the Personnel Board or to the Comptroller. I have two questions. One, how many non-union employees do we have? And what's the total annual spend on non-union salary? I said $100,000 seems like a lot of money. Maybe we just give it to them and skip the...
Mr. Shemetz?
Well, I'll be glib about the number. If you take that number up there at 274,000 and divide by 2.5%, you'll get the total salary for the year. It's bigger than 100,000.
Yeah.
Town manager? Town comptroller, Stacy Ward?
Yeah, this is not just compensation, this is also classification. This is also a study of compare the classification of people doing various jobs to those around in other towns, either similar sized towns or towns in the area. I mean, one of the problems we run into when we do a cost comparison or a salary comparison is that we don't have people here, or from town to town, these jobs have grown separately, so it's very difficult to do comparisons when we are actually rewriting job descriptions. So this will be, and I think that's true everywhere, so that may not be an obvious thing in the end, but it will be helpful at least to understand where it is we're kind of in the same place and where we have radically different classifications.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Now proceed with the motion as previously read. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion 3 passes. Motion 4 is moved and seconded that the town raise and appropriate the sum of $469,365 for the FY26 unallocated wage account to provide for the revision and adjustments in salary and wages and other benefits for unsettled collective bargaining agreements for municipal union employees of the town for FY26. Said sum to be allocated pursuant to a subsequent town meeting vote. All those in favor? Oh, yes.
Jason Ruder, Precinct 5. Through you, Town Moderator, could someone talk about the assumptions that were used to calculate that number? Are we assuming a 3, 4, 5% increase, or how did we get to that number?
Mr. Shemetz?
So we don't like to say, because we don't really want people backing into what we're assuming that they're going to get. So no, I don't think I will.
Anyone else? Okay, now we'll proceed to the vote as previously read into the record. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes. Thank you. So Article 34 was part of the consent agenda, as was Article 35. So now we'll proceed to Article 36, which the proponent is the town manager.
Thank you. Good evening, town meeting members. Article 36 is our standard article we have every spring that we need to true up the budget so that we have a balanced budget at the end of going into the next fiscal year. So this motion is to transfer $1,599,050 from free cash and $400,000 from overlay surplus to reduce the tax levy for FY26. This closes the gap in the budget that was brought forward by FinCom. The budget amendment related to the school budget that was approved had its own dedicated funding source of free cash, so that does not impact the motion under Article 36. Thank you.
Thank you. Select Board, just yell it out.
Favorable action, unanimous.
Thank you. FinCom,
Finance Committee recommends
Before we proceed to the motion, town meeting, I need to ask town meeting to waive the 7-day notice requirement on the amended motion for Article 36. All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Motion passes. So now for the main motion of this article, it is moved and seconded that the town transfer $1,599,050 from free cash and $400,000 from the overlay surplus to reduce the tax levy for FY26. All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion carries. Okay. Okay, now we're going to proceed back to where we left off in the bylaw discussion. As you will remember, on last Thursday's meeting, the chair split the question, as you can see along these lines, into subsections, and I thank you for your support in doing that. We're going to refresh our memories a little bit with a presentation from the proponent, the Committee on Government Regulations. I will project 10% more. You can also come up. There's a lot of empty seats here at the beginning. Mr. Nixon in particular could come up. We can all get close like we like each other. Seeing nobody take that offer, I'm a little skeptical that we all like each other, but. Ms. Blackwell.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Oh, no. We're cursed. Oh, is this bad? Oh,
Wow, hey.
Okay.
The Committee on Government Regulation gets credit for fixing the microphones.
Okay.
Well, the projector doesn't work now, so.
Yeah. So we'll work with it. I don't want to delay you guys. So I'll just quickly refresh the items that I showed you earlier this week, last week. I think it was last week. It's all a blur. So there's some, oh, wow, we have both now. Okay, great. Okay, we're rolling here. So there's small changes here that we're basically updating the bylaws to come into line with practice. Also, same thing here. This is how things are done. We're just updating the bylaws to reflect that. Now, here, there are more substantial changes, and let me talk about the 13 days, because there's been some questions about, well, where did this 13-day come from? Is that enough time to make changes? So I'm just gonna skip ahead and show you how the 13 days came to be. So this is a calendar that was shared, that it was prepared by the town manager's office. This is their schedule. The warrant closes 45 days before the first night of town meeting. We're not changing that. The motions and backgrounds are due Friday, March 28th. That's 30 days before the start of a town meeting. We're not changing that. So if you notice, the warrant is sent to the printer Tuesday, April 8th. The motion book is sent to the copier Wednesday, April 9th. The warrant's mailed Thursday, April 10th. The motion book is returned from the printer April 15th. So what we're suggesting is that the warrant and the motion book, which has already been printed, just be uploaded to the town website 13 days in advance. We're not changing when things are due. We're just trying to make it more readily available for town meeting members and the general public to review before the start of town meeting. The other big change we're suggesting is town meeting time. So I'm not going to walk you through the small differences, but what I'm told, high level, the changes between Robert's rules and town meeting time are less than 5%. So town meeting time has most of Robert's rules, but what's different is the context. So everything in the book is built around how town meeting works. And we did a little homework to see which towns used town meeting time and which towns used Robert's rules. This is by no means exhaustive, but it gives you a sense of which towns have switched over. So all the ones here, Weston, Belmont, Lexington, Wellesley, Hingham, Hopkinton, Concord, Bedford, Sherburne, Carlisle, Dover, Sherborne, Duxbury, which have a mixture of open town meeting and representative town meeting, all use town meeting time, as well as Sudbury, Andover, Milton, Acton, Sandwich, Needham, Northampton, Westford, Natick, Arlington. Amherst uses Robert's rules. It's harder to find towns that still use Robert's rules than town meeting time. Norwood uses its own bylaws. Winchester, we use Robert's rules. And some of our own changes, I'm told. So it's not 100% Robert's rules. Okay, the last change is motivated by the Town Meeting Communication Study Committee. What I've done here is I've just blown up one of their recommendations, which is to require budget and tax impact estimates for all major articles. We changed the wording to say any that have allocations. So if they're allocating funds, we want the proponent to specify funding source, which is done now, funding duration, which is new, and amount. That's current now. And then what's new is having FinCom review these costs and then estimate and report to town meeting the budget and tax impacts. And so why are we suggesting this? Because it's a standardized approach for reliably comparing the cost and impacts and using the same assumptions, because in the past, articles have used different assumptions about wage rates, benefits, equipment, and rates to borrow funds. So I hope I've summarized most of the changes, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you. So we're going to proceed to the first motion that we left off on, and I'll read that now. It is moved and seconded that the town vote to amend certain subsections of Chapter 2, Section 1.3 of the town's general bylaws as set forth in the revised article. We're going to hear from the town select board first.
Point of information, are we doing all the proposed edits at once, or are we doing them?
Per, one at a time for the 13 subsections. We split the question, and that's still valid.
As we were last week, we are still today in favor of this change. So favorable action on 1.3.
On the question, Ms. Ansara for Precinct 1?
And I see your hesitance in calling me.
Well, you have been in my nightmares all week.
So I want to
offense.
assure you that before speaking to you about the footnotes today, I did a lot of homework. I don't want to waste your time. And there will be some suggestions that I make that what you see on the screen, but also on your latest printed version or on the website, what is supposedly the latest version, is incorrect in some ways, but perhaps that we can get over that. However, there are some problems with the footnotes that we might want to think about. Here, it's not 10 days, one and crossed out one. What the real thing is online right now is 1 and 2, and eventually those footnotes will change, because right now they say when it changed from 7 to 10, and we're making another change now, and that will change. So the footnotes will change in this section. So one thing we could do right now is just not look at the footnotes in this section and pass just the language, regardless of what the footnotes say. That becomes tricky, however, in the next few sections. So,
We'll see you then. Further on the question? What's your name and precinct? No, I think you were first, right? Okay. Name
Thank
and
you, Mr.
precinct?
Moderator. Matthew Eaton, Precinct 1. Through you to the town manager, can you please respond to the proposed calendar and timeline for the warrant shown during the presentation? Is it feasible or accurate?
Beth Rudolph, town manager.
Thank you. So I just wanted to mention that the calendar that was part of Megan's presentation is sort of an internal planning document that we use at the staff level every year. In the town manager's office, we put together what our aspirational schedule is to get things completed within the timeline required in the code of bylaws and the charter. And so a lot of those dates that were put out there are our internal schedules so that we can make sure we have select board votes and town council review in a timely manner. The dates that we work backwards from are the notification requirements that are in the bylaw and the charter, which is what you see here in section 1.3 about when the warrant has to be received or mailed to our residents. And so, I mean, I think the change that's being proposed here with the 13 days being put up to the town's website, that is doable for us because the warrant takes a number of days to be printed. So certainly when we send the warrant to the printer, we can then put it up on the website because it's not going to change from them. I would come back with another comment on section 3.8.2, but we're not there yet. So thank you.
Thank you. While we have this, I just want to go back for a second to answer the question about non-union town employees. There are 382 full and part-time employees, of which 180 are full-time employees. Okay, further on the question? Is town meeting ready for the vote? I'm sensing it is. So this is on 1.3. All in favor? Any opposed? The motion carries. Okay. It's moved and seconded that the town vote to amend certain subsections of Chapter 2, Section 2.2 of the town's general bylaws as set forth in the revised article. Can we have the recommendation of the select board?
So on 2.2, we were unfavorable only because we didn't think that debt service on capital needed to be called out. So it wasn't a philosophical change, more of a not necessary change.
Well, I did it as subsection, so yeah, so
Okay.
this is together.
Well, it's the same answer for 2.2.1, but for different reasons. Specifically for the Committee on Government Regulations, the way this is written, it is an annual action at precinct meetings, which in our precinct meeting on the first night we did, but we reaffirmed our representatives to Committee on Names and Government Regulations because they are currently serving a 3-year term. So this implies that that might turn over annually, and right now we appoint our precinct members to 3-year terms. So we didn't think this was a necessary change either, so unfavorable on that as well.
To the residents of the side of the room, are we touching this one? Do you guys, no? Ann?
Additionally, in the meat of the subject, if we are going to nominate members to serve on the town meeting for government regulations rather than just elect them outright, then we have to have some sort of verbiage that addresses what happens if the nomination fails. We don't have that. Then we got the problem with the footnotes. So it turns out that this section 2.1 is so, and 2.2.1 is so extremely screwy that we probably don't want to make any more changes. Just to look over some of the stuff that we have. First, in the E code, the 3 that you see after the word last and E code is a 1. And that probably should be a 1. We need to adopt a standard for footnotes. When are we going to start renumbering?
We did.
okay?
We did, that was Article.
On 54.
54.
Right.
And when the Attorney General approves the changes, then everything will be renumbered and re-footnoted.
Okay. Then when you renumber, 2.2.1 has 1 and 2 again, so it's not being done by section, it's being done by subsection. And then those are indented. The second footnote is presented before the first. It goes 2 and 1, and the indenting is strange, and the numbering is also strange. You've got proper number 4 after the word proper in your text. The bottom line here is that somebody wrote the footnote as if it was text. They didn't use a footnoter. And also, we have a PDF. PDFs are necessary to have because you have to be able to give somebody, here was the code on Tuesday in 2025 in May, right? You have to be able to do that, so you need a PDF. But the PDF's footnotes are completely different than E-code. So in our existing code, the footnotes are different than what's in E-code. And so that means we don't really know even what exists. When we make these changes, each one of these changes is going to be footnoted that we made the change, and that's going to compound the problem. So CGUR, before making any changes, needs to go and fix this footnote problem, and somehow, I'm willing to make that an administrative change, that it doesn't go before town meeting or anything, but that must be fixed, and the way that we produce PDFs must be fixed, so that before these changes that we may adopt tonight are perpetrated.
Okay. We'd like to hear from the town clerk on that question.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Just to be clear, the town of Winchester used to do the code of bylaw internally. So, Ann, you're correct. When I was typing it in a Word document, I was inserting footnotes, and they were just calculating 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 all the way through the document. We noticed, of course, when we went digital with general code, there is no consistent system, so that we have a repetitive problem, and it just is systemic throughout the document. Yep. So when you passed 54, that was the reason, working with the government regs committee. So my office will take that as an administrative. We're gonna strip the whole document. We're gonna make it library science codified, and you're gonna have sections and subsections. So when you then go online, and you want to go to section 1.1 of chapter 1, and you're looking at 1.1 of chapter 7, it's going to be codified to distinguish. So the links work, and we know that it's 1.1 belonging to 7 and belonging to 1. So it's a little bit boring, but nonetheless, that article will handle that. So I would encourage you to continue to talk about the substance of the articles, and then those footnotes you can leave to me, okay? Any
Thank
questions?
you.
No?
Any further questions on this motion? All right, I believe town meeting is ready for the vote. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? All right, let's get our clickers out. So I'm going to reread the motion, and then we'll open up the V-voter for 30 seconds. It is moved and seconded that the town vote to amend certain subsections of Chapter 2, Section 2.2 of the town's general bylaws as set forth in the revised article.
I don't have one from motion 3. I've got a whole bunch of other. I got 3
The motion fails. Moving on to motion 4. It is moved and seconded that the town vote to amend certain chapter 2, section 2.3 of the town's general bylaws as set forth in the revised article. Can we get the recommendation of select board? Yep. Good? Yeah, I think we're good. Okay, motion 4. Can we get the recommendation of the select board?
This one, we really didn't have a position on. It might be a useful clarifying matter, but we didn't really take a position.
Sorry about that. Anybody on this question? Mr. Miller, precinct 6.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. It seems to me that the additional language is not necessary. It says the spring meeting is devoted primarily, I can't read it, but there should be a town meeting which shall be primarily concerned with non-fiscal matters. So primarily already says, but not limited to. So this is just saying something twice, moreover, a second time and a third time. Unnecessary.
Any other questions? So if we vote on this, if the motion fails, then effectively there would be no change. And if it's approved, then this would be the change. So I think we can go forward with the vote. 1 second. Mrs. Brady?
Yep, Anthea Brady, Precinct 1. So we just voted and did not pass the language in 2.2, which says there shall be a Springtown meeting which shall be primarily concerned with the adoption of an annual budget, and we did not adopt the language that said but not limited to. So for consistency's sake, I believe it would make sense to not adopt the language on the fall town meeting.
Thank you. Anyone else on the question? All right, I believe we're ready for the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? No. The motion fails. Okay. It is moved and seconded that the town vote to amend certain subsections of Chapter 2, Section 2.4 of the town's general bylaws as set forth in the revised article. Select Board?
Favorable action on this change. Certainly, the town manager's office is prepared to make updates on the town website, and yeah, we're in favor of this change.
Thank you. Anyone on this question?
Shannon Scott-Fernalia, Precinct 4. Question through you to whoever. Is there an option for saying by mail or email so that we are limiting paper? I know we have another one later. I think the more we can move to email, the better we can address climate change and things like that.
Through the chair to town council. What? So the charter may require that it be mailed. And the charter.
May or does?
We're looking at it. It does. Yep. Do you want to speak to that?
We have to mail it because in the charter, there's requirements and specifically things like when I certify the bond borrowings that you do, we need to say there was a mail and a warrant returned by the United States Post Office. So it's required in the charter.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Name and precinct?
O.P. Hamanvik, Precinct 4. I think when we changed it from all the town bulletin boards to change the website, we left the word all in, which I think should be removed. So it should say on the town website as opposed to on all the town websites.
Can we get a motion?
Yes.
Second? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. So now, as the motion is amended, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? This motion carries as amended. Okay. Motion 6. It is moved and seconded that the town vote to amend certain subsections of Chapter 2, Section 3.1 of the town's general bylaws as set forth in the revised article. On behalf of the Select Board, Ms. Pryor.
So, Select Board was not unanimous on this, but we did recommend favorable action on Robert's rules. Certainly our understanding is that it does simplify the process. And there was, the opposition to this was, I think, the learning curve for town meeting, but it seems like a change that we need to make to kind of catch up with all the other towns. So favorable action and not unanimous. Sorry. For town meeting time, for the motion, how's that? There we go.
I'm not sure who was been camped out longer, so we'll start with you.
Josh Bears, Precinct 7. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. And I guess through you to the proponent. Two questions really. Does the subsequent sections outline all the changes as a result of switching from Robert's rules to town meeting time?
No.
Megan Blackwell.
Thanks for the question. It does not. So the town meeting time could be the only change, and the other specific changes that call out town meeting time wouldn't be necessary, and there are other changes that aren't called out.
Okay, follow up to that is, does everyone have free access to town meeting time? And if not, what's the cost to the town to give us access?
Cost of the town. Jay, do you want to answer? Because you had an answer for the last question. Town Council Jay Taylorman.
So on the first question, it's pretty typical for towns that even have town meeting time or Roberts to all specific local provisions that are more specific, so they would control over anything conflicting. We do that with Roberts right now in this town, and a lot of towns that use town meeting time and specify it also do it. They change quantums and have different requirements. Some eliminate motions for reconsideration in the entirety. So it's not switching to town meeting time wouldn't change those subsequent local provisions at all, or their viability. As to the availability of town meeting time, it's pretty typical for the local library to carry it. It is, I know, in the Minuteman system. The cost to folks, I don't know how much Roberts costs on the bookshelf. It is available electronically. I don't think it's super expensive in paperback and in hardcover. I don't know the comparable cost to Roberts, though.
Okay, thank you. So it's available in the library?
No.
I'm not sure if the current version is available yet, but it's certainly in the Minuteman library system because I'm aware of that. But so that means you can get it. I don't know if they're planning to order more copies. I suppose that's a library decision.
Thank you.
Ms. Sarah?
Okay, I did a lot of homework, as you can see. I have both the latest version of Roberts, and I have the third version of town meeting time, because the fourth version is not available in book form anywhere.
It is. It is.
It is not. Try
No,
to
it
buy
is.
it. You can.
I have it.
You can.
We have it.
How much did you spend for it? 80?
It was the most expensive book I've ever bought, but
Right.
it's,
So it's 100.
It's available online in 3 versions right now for anyone.
Online, you can get it Kindle, $50. It's supposed to be 80 from the moderator's site, from the TM.
In hardcover, there is the paperback, which I think Bill has, is like 40, is my understanding.
It's $50 Kindle. Anyway, this is the third version, and one of the reasons why I am hesitant to adopt town meeting time is because of its lack of availability in the fourth version. If we had 7 of these running around in the Minuteman Library, maybe I would feel differently. If the cost was lower, also, maybe I would feel differently, but I'm hesitant there. I actually really tried to compare these two, and I've been using the two during these last couple of sessions, these 4 sessions. This looks like it's harder to use because it's much thicker, but it's actually super well indexed, and it's not that hard to use. This also isn't that hard to use, and it is more specific. What's great about this book, Town Meeting Time, is if you're the moderator. It has a lot of tips on how to run the meeting effectively that you're not going to get in here. And I like it for that reason. There are differences, specific differences between the two that would have legal implications, like whether or not we used 2/3 or not. And what language do we use when we want to send something back to study? This body has already been caught in between these 2 books. I remember there was one town meeting where we were arguing over whether or not there was a 2/3 or a required. And having read these 2, I now realize this was a problem between these 2 books. We also just recently, we sent an article back for study. In town meeting time, the way that you do that is you have to send it back to a specific committee. We didn't do that. And in Roberts, you would say, I send it back to this town meeting as a whole, informally. We didn't say that either. So kind of not following either one of them, and I really think we should follow one of them. But right now, I would say that we shouldn't move over because we have a lot of other things that we expect back in the fall. So why don't we put this off until the fall? And we don't really need, we can either delay until time certain in the fall, or we could send it back for further study. I know that the Committee on Government Rules gave us one sheet. We got a view graph of changes between the 2. I can tell you from my own looking at these 2 that was unsourced, but it also was very inadequate. It does not cover all of the differences between the 2.
Okay, thank you. Your time has expired. Further on the question, Mr. Chimetz?
Peter Chimetz, Precinct 5. I am going to make the motion to send this back to committee. Before I do, I want to say a couple things. One is, we do stuff in the meeting. We're going to continue to do stuff in the meeting. We're going to do stuff whether we have Robert's Rules of Order. We're going to do the similar stuff if we do town meeting time. What we do is of a certain level of complexity, and it's also tailored in a certain way, as the past speaker was saying. You know, we don't do anything that's particularly cogent to or indicative of Robert's Rules. There are a bunch of changes that we do. We don't spend a whole lot of time putting things on the table and taking things off the table. There's a whole bunch of things we don't do that are Robert's Rules. So we could make Robert's Rules pretty much whatever we wanted, except for those areas where there's certain 2/3, 1/2 required. But there's a larger question, and I just want to surface this larger question, and that is Robert's Rules of Order are here to make sure that we aren't a debating society. And a lot of what we find uncomfortable about order here is when we're debating. And it's not that we shouldn't be debating, but that we should be making rules that work with debating. But with 100 and whatever people, that's not going to work. You're going to have to work in an environment of Robert's Rules of Order. Now, there was a professor at MIT, I believe he's emeritus now, named Larry Susskind, who wrote a book called Breaking Robert's Rules of Order. He also wrote a book called Dealing with an Angry Public. And his view, when I read it, I thought was wrong, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that there are certain questions that he is right on the way you deal with it, and that is you need a pre-meeting. You need a pre-meeting in which all of the people who are for something go into one room, and all the people who are against something go into the other room, and everybody gets their story straight, and they're given a certain amount of time when they come back into this meeting to describe it, and then we don't have to hear the same thing over and over and over again, and we get to hear a cogent discussion one way or the other, and anybody can go into any of those two meetings and watch it happen. And when I read that, I said, oh, that's absurd, it'll never happen. And then I realized I sat through it once, and I sat through it in this town once. I tried to get a zoning variance, and we walked into the zoning office, the zoning meeting, and I thought, okay, this is going to be really fast. And it was jammed with people all over the place, and I couldn't figure out why. And I quickly realized this is going to go to 3 in the morning. And so I quickly looked, and I realized I'm last, so I'm definitely going to 3 in the morning. And the first group up was something to do with the golf club. They wanted to cut down 11 acres of trees. And I said, oh, that's clearly what these people are here for. And that got tabled, and then 4 people left, and we still had 75 people in the room. And then I realized I was behind the great Burger King drive-through debate. So, but the head of the zoning appeal board said, oh, we have a room upstairs for the pros and a room downstairs for the antis. Everybody go, work that out, we'll be here. And then the room was empty. And we were away in the back row, and they go, yeah, come sit at the table. And everything went very quickly, and we got the hell out of there before they all showed up and argued till 3 in the morning. So we have actually used it in this town. We have already begun the process of creating something like this with the consent agenda. The consent agenda actually says that we've all voted for it. We just vote for one thing, and 7 or 8 or 10, or I never counted, so wonderful, get them out of the way. But this would actually work within the consent agenda process in which we decided that some things are so insignificant that we're not going to vote on it separately, and some things are so significant that we're going to have a multiple meeting process. Now, I don't know how that's going to work. There's lots and lots and lots of logistics. I can hear all the people who have any knowledge about this. Their heads are grinding already on this one. But I suggest we think about that, and we think about actually what we're trying to accomplish. Because changing from Robert's Rules of Order to town meeting time because we think other towns are going to do it. Okay, are we all moving to Sherburne? Do we need to be ready when we move to Sherburne about how we're going to deal there? I don't think so, but in any event. So I move that we take whatever Amendment 6, and we refer it back to committee with them to bring it back in the fall. And this part is not going to be part of the motion because, but I'm going to suggest that when they do that, and I'm happy to volunteer to help them, that they have a group of people study town meeting time, do a comparison, put together handouts that compare one to the other, and then take it upon themselves to find somebody else in town meeting and train them so that we can look at what this process is going to look like.
Second.
I can allow the motion. I think referring this to a committee when the article itself, the motion itself is like literally one sentence. I think this debate that we're having right now is really helpful for the committee. We can refer it to the committee, but I don't want to damper debate when they're just going to be looking at themselves over the summer and come back in the fall and not know what this body thinks about the topic. So I think that's unhelpful. Excuse me, I think that's unhelpful. You got a second, we can have the vote, but I don't see why we can't listen to people talk about this.
Just point of question.
Mm-hmm.
One sentence that changes all the rules.
Yeah, and
Yeah, but we're having a debate about it.
I don't think I'm cutting off debate. There's still debate on You can still have this.
If your motion passes, we stop debating this issue. We stop talking about this issue. What?
Yeah, you can discuss it, you can have the same discussion as an order on my amendment as on the main motion.
Okay. Yeah. On the motion to refer, is there any debate? Pam Court?
Hi, actually, this could be on the main motion or the motion referred to committee. I have a copy loaned to me by an amazing person that I was able to look through, and I guarantee you I didn't look through it nearly as thoroughly as Ms. Sarah did, but I did look through it. It's got a great section on guidance for the moderator, and it's a good section actually for members to read because it gives them an idea of what to expect. So I think that there's a lot of merit to town meeting time, but I think there are a lot of questions and a lot of unintended consequences, to steal one of our select board members' highly used phrase, unintended consequences, and I agree that in this particular case, there are a lot. When I looked through it, it's confusing to understand rules for prioritizing nested motions, so that if we make a motion to amend and a motion to amend the motion to amend, and I move the motion, which motion? The motion to amend, the motion to amend to amend. So it was confusing how that worked, and it seems it's also confusing the way it's confusing to know if there are differences between the third version and the fourth version with respect to whether or not it's a majority vote or a 2/3 vote, and it's definitely different than Robert's rules. And we are a body of very, very smart, very, very detail-oriented people. And I can see adopting this and not thinking about how that could change things, and people discovering when something came up that something passed by majority instead of 2/3 when they felt that it needed that additional thing. I think this body cares about what rules we use to make our decisions. They stand up and they debate it sometimes within the time of town meeting. So I think it's a good thing to do, and I would actually put a question through to the proponent. How many of those communities are using the 3rd edition versus the 4th edition? How many of those communities have made modifications, and have they codified those modifications? I would be highly in support of going through this, having listening sessions with everybody who is a part of town meeting, and thinking about what do we want to modify in this, so that when we go into fall town meeting to vote on it, we know what the consequences are going to be, and they're consequences that we've thought about. So that's, to me, in either one, I would actually prefer that this go to a committee, and rather than putting it on the decennial review, who's gone through an incredible amount of things, I would say the committee, it should be referred to as town meeting itself in terms of looking at it and seeing, getting suggestions from this body for things that they might want modified, so that something can be put together. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to speak to that? Committee on Government Regulations?
Sure. To Ms. Court's question, do we know which version each used? Some towns mentioned which version they used. Some just said the latest version. But one of our committee members had a good suggestion at our pre-meeting, and sorry I didn't convey it, was to use the time over the summer for training on town meeting time, so we could all get to the same level. So rather than debate, well, should we use this, should we use Robert's rules, but use it to level set and all of us learn the same thing, because it seems right now some people know Robert's rules well, some people know how Winchester has changed Robert's rules and uses it for town meeting, but just switching and learning, maybe our town council could offer that training, is an option. Thank you.
Thank you. Further on the motion?
So it depends, because there are some towns that specify the third edition. I don't think there's any towns left that specify the second edition, but most just say town meeting time. So, and the changes from the third to the fourth edition, there's a few key ones, but mostly it was cleanup and getting rid of some vestigial parts of it, but the actual, like the motions, the rank of motions, with the exception of one in particular, really just didn't change much. It was really more of a cleanup effort and modernizing the language in this version. And I know because I was part of that team, but but you're right, some towns are stuck, and some towns actually also on Roberts, the few that still specify it, will sometimes have an addition too, and they're like way back, like 5 or 6 editions back. So, yeah.
All right, thank you. Further on the motion?
Hi, Hillary Eaton, Precinct 1. So a question through you to, I guess, the government committee. If I'm remembering correctly, because it was 2 meetings nights ago, last Thursday, in some of the slides that were presented, and then also I think in the materials that came out originally to educate town meeting members, I remember a specific bullet point that talked about previous moderators being in support of the change to town meeting time. And I was wondering if you could clarify if that's Heather Von Mering or if that was another moderator that you were referring to.
Committee on Government Regulations.
Thank you for the question. So at one of our public meetings, we reached out to the then current moderator, who is Heather Von Mering, and we've also spoken to the now current moderator on his preference for which procedures to use. So those are the 2 moderators we spoke to.
Got it. So I'm confused because both on Facebook posts that are available to the whole town and in personal communication, Heather has stated that she is completely not in favor of moving to town meeting time, that she thinks version 3 is a hot mess, and that version 4 hasn't been independently reviewed by a law firm.
This is not in order. This is not relevant to, is she here to speak for herself, or?
I believe she couldn't attend, but I'm asked a question, was given an answer that was, yes, she supports it, and I think there are materials that the entire town can view, so not privileged materials that state something different. So I'm just really confused about sort of like...
That's not a public, that's a private Facebook page that you're referring to, if we're thinking of the same one.
What are we thinking of?
The Winchester Politics page that you have
Not-
to be
not
accepted
politics
into?
page.
Oh, okay. Can you say how that the former moderator voiced her support at the time?
Sure. So the process that I explained that our committee used is we reached out to boards and committees and said, we want your ideas. How would you like to improve the bylaws? And when Ms. Von Mering attended our meeting in January, she listed a bunch of things she wanted to see changed. And moving to town meeting time was one of those changes. And our committee had corresponded with her, so I'm not quoting her what she said recently, but what she said at that January meeting and in correspondence was favorable. Thank you.
Thank you. Further on the question?
Hi, Chris Jones, Precinct 7. Through you, Mr. Moderator, to the proponent. Can we have a quick summary of the major differences between town meeting time and Robert's Rules, since we're...
I think Attorney Tellerman's probably best suited to explain the differences.
Is there a slide that just shows the quick summary of the major differences?
I think there was a slide that I didn't prepare, but
There
I
was
think...
a handout. And is it still there?
Right, but I remember in the night 1, there was also, I think, a thing. So let me, well, if people want to look for that, that's fine. So I want to give a couple of disclosures here. I am a town meeting moderator in my town and have been for a really long time. I use town meeting time. I'm active in the Mass Moderators Association. I was asked to draft the several chapters of the new version, which I did. I don't make any money from it. It was a labor of love. So I'm not advocating one way or the other here. So, but I just wanted to disclose that publicly. I think to understand the differences a little bit, we have to go backwards. And one of the big changes, and I think Ms. Sarah will note this, from version 3 to version 4, is that town meeting time came about in the first edition in the 60s because Roberts wasn't very well suited to town meeting. So it was an effort to translate, essentially, Roberts to town meeting practice. It was not just Roberts, but it was primarily Roberts. And as the second and the third version came out, they continued to reference in most sections Roberts. And, you know, town meetings in Massachusetts are very different. Roberts Rules was not built on that. So there was some evolution of things. There was some additional evolution in the newest version, in motions for reconsideration, while still preserving the Roberts Rule. They offer another possible way forward that is more well suited for town meetings where you don't have to challenge voters because it can be a tricky process. There's a couple of different quantums of vote, although very few, and a lot of towns change that quantum anyway. The concept of indefinite postponement has a nuance a little bit. Consent agendas are discussed at length. There is a slight, both Roberts and town meeting time, in response to another question, do have ranking of motions. So it's not just town meeting time, and the ranking is very similar, with the exception that a new change to motions for indefinite postponement in the new town meeting time increased the rank there, but the rank is actually right on the back cover of it. So otherwise, most of the traditional motions, if not all of the traditional motions that we make here all the time, are the same exact motions that are in Roberts, including motions to refer and commit, which exist in both. There's a few nuances. I'm happy to talk with folks if this gets committed or referred and do trainings, or if it gets passed and do trainings. As I think it's pretty, people won't really notice the difference after a meeting or two with it. That's just my feeling, but again, I understand that change is hard, and I'm not trying to put my thumb on the scale here.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Further on the question, Mr. Vernaglia.
Thank you very much. Brian Vernaglia, Precinct 4. I would venture to guess there's 5 people in this room who understand the difference between these two documents with any detail, and one of them is our town council. So it seems sort of out of order, but not in the technical way, to be debating this now when we haven't had a series of presentations on the difference. This is something that could take place over the summer. We could have the Committee on Government Regulations or anybody else, or town council walk us through the difference. We could all understand it, and when we come back in the fall to vote on this, we would all be better informed. I know I don't know the difference between two of these. Town meeting time sounds nice, so maybe we should be using that, but I don't know the difference. I will be voting to postpone, and if that doesn't happen, I will be voting no. Thank you very much.
Further on the question, Mr. Jurius.
Jurius, Precinct 8. I have nothing against town meeting time. I have nothing against Robert's Rules. I reiterate what Mr. Vernaglia said, is I think most people here don't know the difference. So I don't think that any of us could vote as educated town meeting members as to which one is better. I should note that we already have, as has been noted, we already have changed some of Robert's rules. I don't know if it's been codified anywhere. Certainly, I don't know how many people here know that we've changed the rule for reconsideration. But I am concerned that if we don't know how we've changed Robert's rules, we won't know how to apply similar changes to town meeting time. So I think we need to just take a step backwards and understand the rules that we actually are currently using so that we can do proper comparison and understand how we might modify town meeting time. I'm also really concerned that we are now, whether we use Robert's Rules or town meeting time, this is now an obstacle to this town meeting, because I would hope that every single member here would have access to that document, not just by taking it out of the library, because if everyone took it out of the library a week before town meeting, no one would have access to it. So I think that if we're going to require the use of either of these, that town meeting members be given a copy of these rules so that they can take it and set it next to their copy of the US Constitution and memorize it. So when we are in town meeting, we actually understand what's going on. I should note that I did actually also, as Mr. Kaimet said, I did also read Breaking Robert's Rules, and I was actually so enamored of it that I was going to copy for everyone on the planning board, but I decided that that was too much money. But I also will be voting for referring to committee, and because this is such a huge deal to this body in terms of how we run everything, and I think we really need to be much better educated so that when we do come into those fine details of when we get to defer to committee or whatever, that we understand. So I hope you'll all vote for referring to committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Further on the question, Mr. McGonigal.
Yeah. Thank you. Bill McGonigal, Precinct 3, and I was one of the dissenting votes on the select board advocating that we should not be adopting town meeting time right now. And before I get into my own thoughts, I will just say everybody here should have some email address that is listed with town meeting. And if you should check it today, a lot of us did receive a rather lengthy and well-written opinion from Ms. Von Meering explaining her concerns as to why this should be referred to committee. I don't want to speak for her, but you should check your email and read it yourself, hopefully before we make this vote. I agree with her. Somebody much, much smarter than me once said that it is through process and procedure that we protect our rights. And that's what we're voting on here. What is the process? What is the procedure? And a little change in any of those things can have really big ripple effects. Think of how much time we all spend in here trying to have a good conversation together. That's a fraction of the time that's put into these town meetings by the staff, by boards and committees like Select Board, Finance Committee, Planning Board, School Committee, all of them. And the changes in here are going to impact the way all of us do our jobs, in the way we all spend our time, in the way that we all get to the right decision on things. And if we are not confident that every single change is one that we agree with and want to implement, we need to take the time to answer those questions first. There's no rush to do this. The town meeting time that's in front of us today was only published in 2024. It hasn't been widely adopted yet. And a lot of towns that have adopted it, as you've heard, they've edited it, they've tweaked it to their own practice. That's what we should be doing. We shouldn't be the leader here. We shouldn't be the first adopter. There's always a risk there. We want to be slow, we want to be cautious. That's the way the law works. That's how we protect ourselves. There's no need to make a drastic change right now. I don't want to give anything up that might risk us doing things the way we would like to do them, the way we need to do them, the way we understand. We can do them better, but let's take that step cautiously first. And waiting 6 months to do that study is just nothing in the grand scheme of things. But rushing it now could jeopardize everything. So why take the risk when we have the time to do it cautiously? Thank you.
Further on the question, Ms. Simboli.
Dorothy Simboli, Precinct 6. Just wanted to comment. I support the 3 previous speakers about not rushing this, but I also wanted to say that I did also had a conversation with our former moderator, and she expressed that she was, well, I don't even want to say what she said because I don't think that anyone should speak for her unless she's here. So I think we all need to sort of discount whatever anybody has said. Oh, this is what the former town moderator said. Other than, I have not read the email, but whatever she threw out in that email. So, thank you.
Thank you. Is it new information?
Yes.
All right.
This is Shannon Scott Fernalia, Precinct 4.
Go right
I'm a
ahead.
big fan of the library, and with all due respect to Mr. Jirius, I certainly hope if we adopt this, which I appreciate that GovRegs looked into this, that we don't send one to every household. I'm now, as of a half an hour ago, the third in line for the only circulating copy in the Minuteman Library Network for version 4. It's also in the reference library in Concord, where you could go to look at it. I think in support of postponing this, we could also work with our library to get one in reference so anybody could drop in, and one that could circulate in addition to the copy from Wayland. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, now let's vote on the motion to refer to the Committee on Government Regulations. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The motion, do you want to speak? I mean, we just voted. Well, you weren't in line, so.
Just 3.1.
We already took the vote,
I know.
and you didn't get up when we were, so I'm sorry, but it's not in order. This was a motion to refer to committee as stated by Peter Chimetz. Okay, moving on. We did. The motion to refer passed. The motion to refer carried by a voice vote. Thank you. No, it was a motion to refer to the committee. It's one sentence. It's like the clerk said that it's a motion to refer. That's what we voted on. Is that? The clerk of the meeting would like to.
I wrote, Peter Chimetz moved and it was seconded, refer back to the Committee on Government Regulations to bring back into the fall town meeting.
He's nodding his head.
Is that correct, Mr. Chimetz? Where are you? Okay.
Thank you. Let's move on to motion 7. It is moved and seconded that the town vote to amend certain subsections of Chapter 2, Section 3.4 of the town's general bylaws as set forth in the revised article. On behalf of the Select Board, Ms.
I
Pryor.
have to check over my shoulder to make sure I'm getting the right one. This was favorable action on the Select Board by not unanimous, but we were in favor and letting the moderator limit time. Thank you.
Thank you. On this question?
Josh Bears, Precinct 7, and I'm in favor of this. However, it's inconsistent now with the change at the beginning. It says, unless granted an extension of time by the moderator, and in the last sentence it says, no person shall receive more than one extension of time on any pending motion, but this extension shall be for whatever time voted by town meeting. So we have to change that to decided by the moderator if we're going to be consistent.
Okay. So does that, that amendment have a second?
Motion to amend.
Any second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any? I called the vote. It's already happened. Yeah. Yeah. So if you have something to say, go to the side so that you can be heard at the microphone, not stand up late.
All the time.
I can't hear you. Can you go to the microphone, please?
And the people at home cannot hear.
Mr. Moderator, we are not all spring chickens who are able to make it to these mics on time. So if you could give us a little more time to get up here, especially since some people may still be thinking about how they want to vote. I feel that we've been pushing these votes a little too quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now we're ready to vote on the main motion as amended by Mr. Shapiro.
I'd like to make a comment on it before
Okay.
we vote. And first off, are we voting on the edits to both 3.4 and 3.4.1 or just 3.4?
Both.
Okay. In that sense, first off, when it comes to 3.4, I was the dissenting vote on the select board. Bill McGonigal, precinct 3. As it is right now, the moderator can limit debate as one of his inherent powers. And that has been done before. In fact, that has been a regular practice of our prior moderator, where she would say, comment is limited to 3 minutes, and then she would have the power to let comment go longer, up to 5 minutes, without having to poll the body to see whether or not town meeting agreed with that. That kept things under control, but also gave her the ability to be flexible and give people more time when they needed it. That's why it was the way it was, and that's why I think it should stay the way it was. Limiting it to 3 minutes means we're going to have a vote whenever people want to go longer than 3 minutes. I see that as a waste of time. Now, when it comes to 3.4.1, now that we have referred town meeting time as our new rules back to committee for concern, if we adopt this now, it's making things inconsistent. And so I would, at the very least, make a motion to amend and strike the edit suggested as 3.4.1.
I'm confused as to what.
What he's saying is because we haven't voted town meeting time.
So to be clear, we are currently and will continue to operate under Robert's rules until we adopt town meeting time. But if we adopt this as it currently is, unamended, we will have a carve-out for ending debate on the motion, which would be the one thing we do according to the town meeting time.
Well,
so I am making the motion to strike the edit as suggested in 3.4.1.
Perhaps a motion to refer this to the committee, if it's also going to be dealing with the town meeting time thing, would be more appropriate.
I mean, I will preview that this is going to come up with other subsections of this article. And so, listen, I have made my motion, but I would also support somebody making a motion to indefinitely postpone the entire article at this point, because we're going to be continuing this debate. But I've made my motion. It's on the stack. It's been seconded. You know the rules, Mr. Moderator, so you know what has to happen next.
So it's a motion to strike, correct? Motion to strike?
Yes, motion to amend by striking the proposed edit to 3.4.1.
Second. Okay. All those in favor of the proposed motion to strike 3.4.1?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. So now we go to the full 7.
3.5.
Do we still have to adopt this?
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
3.4, sorry.
Yeah, we have to do 3.4. So now on the 3.4, corrected motion. Does anybody want to speak on this?
I do.
Ms. Crowley?
I do. Maybe I don't understand this all correctly, but when someone wants to speak on a motion, the moderator will turn to the body and say, shall we give this person additional time to speak, and the body votes. I do think that this is, by saying that vote of the meeting, taking that out and giving it to the moderator is now limiting the input of the body to be able to hear what the issues are on a particular subject. So I just think that by switching from vote of the meeting to allowing the moderator to determine who's going to speak, I disagree, and that's my opinion. I'd like to see this stricken, or to. So would I have to make a motion to strike that phrase?
Well, just vote no.
No.
Yeah, just vote no. Anyone further on this question?
Yes, Mr. Moderator. Jared Cumming, Precinct 4. You know, one of the aspects of when the initial proponent gets to the end of their 10 minutes and having to ask the town meeting is you get a sense, right? Because there are some proponents who go 9 minutes, 5 seconds, and there are some proponents who go 13 and a half, 14 minutes when they're given the time. And I think it is helpful for the moderator to turn to the town meeting so they can say yay or nay. So I move that we indefinitely postpone this motion.
Well, this is the main motion, so are we supposed to vote on the motion?
RPC indefinitely postponing 3.4.
Yes, as amended.
Yeah, I move that we indefinitely postpone Article 38, Motion 7.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The motion is indefinitely postponed. Article 38, Motion 8. It is moved and seconded that the town vote to amend certain subsections of Chapter 2, Section 3.5 of the town's general bylaws as set forth in the revised article. Select Board?
So, to the extent that this sentence comes from town meeting time, and the body has decided to IP town meeting time, the select board would have been in favor, but I think we should be consistent with our first few votes we've taken. So it should probably take the same course that all the other proposed town meeting time changes have taken and refer back to the committee for the fall.
Is that a motion?
No, that's just an opinion. Someone else can make the motion.
Someone make a motion?
Mr.
Matthews?
Tim Matthews, Precinct 1. I would be happy to make the motion that Ms. Pryor just suggested, that we send this back to the Committee on Government Regulations.
I've been accused of not letting slower people get up to the mic, so I'm going to let Ms. Sarah speak before we vote on that.
Regardless of whether we IP this, which I would suggest we do, when we look at this again, we have to think about whether or not we're really looking at just the vote to lay a motion on the table. Are you looking at just a motion to lay on the table, or are you looking at indefinite proposals to a certain time, or any other type of referrals that would postpone the motion from this specific session? So I think that we have to remember that there are a lot of different ways to postpone something, and why is this one special, or are we looking at all of them? So that's just something to think about.
Thank you very much. There's a motion to refer. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The motion to refer is carries. We're going to take a 15-minute break. It is now 8:20. We're going to get back at 8:35.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Alan Iden. We are here at the fourth session of Winchester's Spring 2025 Town Meeting. And boy, if you've been watching the past few minutes, it's getting pretty confusing, but let's just take a look at what we have had before the report of the Personnel Board, which is usually one of the last items taken up by a town meeting, was pushed forward. Essentially, they were looking for $236,000 to fund raises, funding for contracts, reserving some money for contracts that are not settled but would have retroactive pay raises, and most non-union employees of the town got a 2.5% raise. That was passed. Another housekeeping article was Article 36 to transfer $1.6 million to reduce the tax levy, more or less a housekeeping article, as I said. That was passed. Then we got into Article 38, which is going on and on. It is updating the bylaws. It's proposals by the Committee on Government Regulations to change part of the town's bylaws. They said essentially most of the changes were to make the bylaws conform to accepted practices. Some of the things were wanting to get the warrant and the motion book on the town's website at least 13 days before town meeting, so all the town meeting members and the general public would have a chance to review them. A lot of the debate tonight was on something called town meeting time. It's a set of rules that govern many of the towns around us. Of course, town meeting is sort of a unique unique New England institution. But currently, Winchester's town meeting is conducted by Robert's rules. Apparently, we've heard tonight that a lot of towns are going to this town meeting time. We also heard that there's only about a 5% difference between Robert's rules and town meeting time. We heard that it's difficult to find copies of this town meeting time, and sometimes expensive. Town meeting members said it's confusing. Town council, who apparently also is a moderator in another town, suggested that most people would not notice the difference after a couple of sessions under this new rules. We did hear suggestions that maybe all the town meeting members should get a copy of this to study it before they make the change. Hearsay from a couple of parties said that our former moderator posted an opinion that she was opposed to this change. So this article about changing to town meeting time was referred back to the committee to represent it at fall town meeting. We heard also discussion on problems with footnotes. Our town clerk said that those will be corrected in the final version. Rules on town meeting. Well, again, a lot of the problems with the discussion now where rules were being changed to conform to town meeting time, where this town meeting is not changing to that, at least yet, until the fall. So a lot of these motions are failing. So I hope that is at least a bit illuminating on what's going on here. You would really need to look at your town warrant to see the corrections and the changes that are being suggested to the bylaws. Probably much too numerous to list here. So town meeting is in recess. I'll be back at the conclusion of tonight's meeting with a recap.
town meeting. And that needs to be discussed.
Okay. Can everybody please take your seats? She's going to do it. Karen Conley, you're up.
Mr. Moderator, Karen Conley, Precinct 3, I would like to propose that we refer the remainder of this article to the Committee on Government Regulations for further consideration through the summer and bring it back in the fall.
A second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries.
Most popular thing I've ever done. Mr. Moderator, if I could beg your indulgence, I do have a question that probably everybody isn't going to want to hear, and it might keep us going all night. I very much support what this body decided to do regarding further study of Robert's rules versus town meeting. However, I also feel very strongly that simply having the Committee on Government Regulations take another whack at it isn't going to be as impactful as we would like. So I would like to ask, what is your sense, sir, and what is the sense of the Select Board or this body? Who can help us look at this? I would propose the current and the most recent moderators and town council are better equipped to evaluate this than we are. And maybe this isn't a subject that we want to discuss tonight, but before we lock ourselves up in a room in August, I'd kind of like to have somebody weigh in on it.
Thank you. I don't have any thoughts on that matter at the moment. Mr. Nixon?
Mr. Moderator, to Ms. Connolly's question, might there be minutes left tonight for some to consider that and bring forward a motion under Article 56?
Yeah, that would be in order. 56 is all the committees for the town meeting. I just want to remind town meeting that if we don't finish our meeting, our work tonight, we will have to skip Monday's meeting and come back on Thursday next because of some scheduling conflicts. So just put that in the back of your head. Article 39. It is moved and It is moved and seconded that Chapter 2 of the Winchester Code of Bylaws, Chapter 2, Section 4.13, to read as follows. I'll just say as printed in the amended article, the amended motion, number 39. What color is that? Green? Is that on behalf of the article? It's petitioner Pam Court.
Hi, thank you to the moderator and to this body for considering this. And I'm going to beg your forgiveness because I've been struggling with exactly what I want to include in what I want to say here. So I did some last minute edits. I couldn't get, our printer wasn't working, so I'm reading off the phone, and I apologize if that seems a little rude. It's going to be harder for me to see the smaller print, so I may not be giving you guys as much eye contact. My apologies for that. When I filed this citizen's petition to change the appointment process for the Finance Committee, I did this with one goal, and it's to broaden the perspectives represented on the committee and ensure that more stakeholders have a voice in the budget process. And what's the problem that needs fixing? And that problem is that we have developed a pattern of disconnect. We've seen that disconnection between FinCom and recommendations and some of our community values. Year after year, FinCom will recommend lower funding for certain services that this body ends up supporting strongly. We saw some debate on circuit breaker funds that serve our most vulnerable students, despite clear guidance from the superintendent on the great risks of using those prematurely. And we've heard our comptroller explain the real picture of our free cash. But the recommendations don't always reflect that picture. And we've seen planning board volunteers do work typically performed by degreed and paid professionals for almost a year, only to have their request for professional support money, whether it's a consultant or hiring an assistant town planner, that was recommended against. We have disconnects in this body when members of FinCom stand up and speak to not funding studies that don't have an immediate or a close enough build date, and funding for it, not funding engineering studies because those engineering studies can end up getting tossed in the trash and new engineering studies need to be funded. This body chose not to listen to that advice. We have a disconnect, and sometimes we have deeper fractures, and I do have some examples that I wrote down, but in the interest of creating a collaborative sense, I don't even want to bring them up because we have to start being better to one another. The examples that I have, the examples I gave, and the examples that I gave, they're not good examples of prudence or collaborative governance, and it's symptoms of a structure that just is no longer working. So what's the proposed solution? Well, today, right now, only 3 individuals, one of whom is appointed and on the Finance Committee, control the appointments to a committee that advises our most critical financial decisions. Meanwhile, other elected officials, whose campaigns we study, debate, and vote on, are left out of the appointment process for this influential board, and that doesn't reflect the seriousness with which we approach town governance. As I said before when I was speaking on the last motion, we're a group of very smart and very persnickety people. Why these boards? The planning board. It helps shape how we receive town revenue. They are the ones who decide how things are going to be zoned, whether we have commercial. They determine a lot of things that can impact the budget and our revenue. And the school committee oversees the largest budget in town. So I just believe that those are 2 additional stakeholders that really should have a say and a voice in this process. I want to make it very clear that this article is not an end goal. It's a beginning. It's a step toward a more inclusive and more collaborative process. Whether it passes or not, and I'm requesting that this body please keep the debate civil and kind, because we need more of that. Whether this passes or not, we need to keep working together to fix a system that isn't serving this community as well as it could. If you don't support this specific change, I'm asking you to at least support creating a committee to study this issue, because we can't keep going down this road. We will not manage a financial crisis successfully without real collaboration, and we know that some financial crises could be down the road. We all belong to the same community. Let's make sure that our processes reflect that. Thank you.
Thank you. Select Board have a recommendation?
Select Board took no position on this article. Should there be a motion to move it to committee, I think Select Board will be in favor. And speaking not as for the full Select Board, but as the chair who has participated in appointments, the composition of the Finance Committee is made up of the people who apply, not the people who appoint. So, but no position favorable or unfavorable from the Select Board.
Thank you. Finance Committee?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, Town Meeting. The Finance Committee voted unanimous unfavorable action on this article. And as we've been through this town meeting, we have budget issues. We have some finance issues. And it seems that the solution is let's just replace the Finance Committee. So this is not the answer. I want to share a quote from the Mass Mutual Association of Town Finance Committees. Let me just get rid of that. Without Finance Committee independent review, town meeting, this body, would be at a severe handicap in voting on financial matters. Moving to the end, defend it. I'm asking town meeting to defend the independence of this committee. It's unfortunate that I have to stand up here and actually do this, to be honest. We have amazing people sitting at this table of extreme caliber that worked through this budget. We're talking about a $4.5 million deficit. We're on the precipice of a large operating override. These are serious issues, and we are serious people. So I ask you to defend it. Second, we did some research. We looked at some other towns and how they appoint Finance Committee members. We looked at bylaws, we Googled, we ChatGPT'd, we did everything we can. This is a list of towns in Massachusetts where the school board or planning board appoint finance committee members. It's blank, because there aren't any. Because it's such a blatant and obvious conflict of interest, and it breaches the independence of this committee. We know we are advisors. I've said that 100 times through this process. Town meeting voted the way town meeting voted. That's perfectly fine. That's the process as designed. We came up with recommendations grounded in analysis. We are principle-based, and we stand by our work. We are asking you to defend the independence of this committee, and I urge you in the strongest possible terms to vote no on this article.
Thank you. Any other boards and committees? School committee?
Good evening. The school committee did not take a position on this article, but if there should be a motion to move it to a study working group, then we would be in support of that.
Thank you. Committee on Government Regulations, you guys kind of, no?
Sure. While we did not vote a position on this article, we found it was not against any law, Massachusetts law that we knew of. And also we noted that an article about finance committee appointments was referred to us last spring, and we reported on it last fall and saw no need to change the existing process of appointing finance committee members.
Thank you. Mr. Vernaglia?
Good evening. Brian Vernaglia on the Planning Board. Planning Board voted no opinion on Article 39. How members of Finance Committee are appointed is under the purview of you, Town Meeting. If Town Meeting asks the Planning Board Chair to serve on the Selection Committee, they will, of course, happily step up as requested. Thank you.
Thank you. Further on the question, Mr. Martman?
Yeah, Doug Marmon, Precinct 1. A quick note, I've spent 9 years on the Finance Committee, and I think it's working fine. I think they are independent and give us a different view than we get from more politically minded committees. So vote this down. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chametz?
Peter Schemitz, Precinct 5. I too am a former FinCom chair, as Doug is. Well, first of all, I agree with the former finance chair, now serving on the select board, that the people who are serving there are the people who apply for the job. There's just not enough people who are applying. It's very hard. It's easier than personnel board, evidently, because we're at 4 and we should be at 7, and we've always been at 4. But if you put anything harder, we've lost people at the planning board. I know we've lost people in the FinCom. The longer you drag it out, and the more people, and especially chairs of these major boards that you're going to get, and they think they should review it, and they think it's important, and it goes on forever, and you lose people in the process. So you're just going to have fewer people. But more importantly, when you're on FinCom, there are two things which are true. It is always true. It was true for the years I've been on there. It's been true for the years I haven't been on there. You are only looking at numbers. And so when you stand up in front of the town meeting and you give them your opinion, you're giving an opinion about numbers. But more importantly, as town meeting members who are not on FinCom, you're expecting the FinCom to stand up and give you a view of numbers. Now, when I was on the FinCom, I hated to spend, but now I'm back here. I love to spend, and I know that those folks sitting at that table are making sure that I don't spend those things I am going to vote for to spend. That's their job. They're going to tell you we're going to hell in a handbasket. They're going to mean we're going to hell in a handbasket. We are going to hell in a handbasket, and we're still going to vote the money. We are still going to vote the money. We tried when I was chair to actually say, let's do some responsible spending. Let's spend more now and save more later. And after everybody was done, they voted us down then, too. And I said, why? It's like, we didn't understand why you wanted to spend more money. It confused us, so we voted against you. So
So this is not a winning thing. I don't think we have to fix it. It's always going to be broken. We're always going to want to spend money, and that's the way it's going to be. But another point is that we all stand here, including me, who was there when it wasn't good, we all stand here going into bad times. We have been in good times for a very long time. Remember that collapse in 2007? That was wonderful. And then we followed it with the pandemic. Great, this is easy. Interest rates were zero, and you can operate at 2.5 with zero interest rates. You don't have to make any decisions. They could sit there and dial it in. They could have written a spreadsheet in 2006 and carried that all the way through to 2022 and never made another decision. They didn't have to. But interest rates are not below 2.5% anymore. People are getting raises. We can't raise the budget faster than 2.5. We are now entering a time when people have to make decisions. They are going to have to tell you, as they are telling you, that we are going to have to cut the budget. A 4% increase or 7% increase in the school system, impossible to sustain. Moving your reserves to the hands of the school committee, unthinkable. From that table, unthinkable. Nobody at that table could make that recommendation. They want those reserves right where they have their hands on them. Once they go to the school committee, it is against the state law to touch it. They can do whatever they want. It's done. And that, from their point of view, is unthinkable. They need that independence, and you are going to need that independence moving forward more than you have in over a decade, in almost 2 decades.
Thank you. Mr. Cummings?
Through you, Jared Cumming, Precinct 4, through you, Mr. Moderator, to the Lord Almighty, why do I have to follow that speaker? I'm waiting.
We're all going to hell in him.
So I also rise in opposition to this article. As it currently stands, the appointing group is the meeting moderator, the chair of the select board, and the chair of the finance committee. Those are not 3 random people. Those are people and groups whose responsibility is to look across the entire town, across every department, across every budget, and to think about how to make the town operate, in the case of FinCom, financially. That independence is critical. There is no need, and this is a solution for the 3rd town meeting in a row, in search of a problem to solve where there is none. And it actually creates a problem by eroding independence. We as a town celebrate diversity in all of its forms, and it's also diversity of thought. And in some ways, it is better that you're choosing between a 7% budget and a 7% increase, whatever it was, and a 3.67% increase, whatever it was, so you can have a healthy, robust debate. We had it. People waxed philosophical for a prolonged period of time. And eventually, a decision was made by the people who are meant to make the decision, which is all of you. There were 2 very different choices to choose from. It was debated, it was potentially modified, and eventually we got to a decision as a town meeting. That's the way it's supposed to be. If you value diversity of thought, then this is a solution in search of a problem which we do not have. It erodes independence and it erodes diversity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ruscinato?
Hi, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Enzo Ruscinato, Precinct 1, also former FinCom chair, 6 years with FinCom. So just a quick statement. I think there's a popular narrative out there that FinCom says no way too often, that they're too conservative compared to the rest of the town. So I think most folks, though, are confusing the cause and effect there, right? It's not that conservatives make up all of Finance Committee. It's that being on Finance Committee will make you be very conservative, right? Like anyone who digs as deeply into the dollars and cents of our budget as that table does, you'll quickly see the challenges. Our expenses grow way faster than our revenues, and 95% of our revenues are coming from us, the taxpayer, and only 5% from businesses. So we're constantly trying to put 10 pounds of need into a 5-pound bag, right? So, you know, over my time, I've seen moderates, liberals, conservatives join the committee, and they quickly end up in the same place as where all the finance committees end up. You could put Bernie Sanders and AOC on FinCom, and it's not going to change the stark facts that I just explained, right? So now that I'm not sitting up front anymore, and I can relax in these nice, comfy seats, knowing that FinCom is challenging every dollar that we're spending and make sure we're getting the most bang for our buck. This article, I feel like, threatens FinCom's independence to to make them more subservient to all of the major committees instead of being accountable to us town meeting members. So for that reason, I'm voting against this article.
Thank you. Further on the question?
Chris Jones, Precinct 7. And again, like the other speakers, the FinCom's job is just strictly to look at the numbers and to figure out a budget. Town meeting can decide what you want to do after that. That's all they have to do. And in order to do that, they have to remain independent. So I urge everybody to vote no against this. Thank you.
Mr. Jarius?
Dave Jarius, Precinct 8. On the planning board for 9 years, no longer on the board, so I can speak more freely. I think that there is more to just numbers that FinCom takes into account. There are values. And I say this based upon having gone through the budget with the planning board and submitting things and having them rejected. And it's not just about numbers, and I realize they do look at the numbers, and I do value the contrarian nature of the FinCom at times, because I think it's important to have clear views of the budget. But I think it simplifies it too much to say they just look at the numbers. You can't just look at the numbers. You have to understand how a department works, what the interaction is between the people, and why the budgets are requested as they are. And in my experience, there's sometimes a disconnect in communications between the people who are asking and the people on FinCom. And so I really want an independent FinCom. And I am concerned that putting people on the selection committee who have a vested interest in how the budget comes out is problematic. It doesn't mean to say I don't think there should be a different way of selecting people on FinCom. I think that is a subject which could be further investigated. I also want to make a point that FinCom advises, but that yellow sheet that we all get is the FinCom's budget. So what you don't know are the interactions that have gone on between the FinCom and all of the departments or the boards in trying to understand where the budget went and why those numbers are there. What you get is a summary produced by FinCom. Now, we all depend upon FinCom to be impartial, but I think it's important to recognize there is a filter. And I'm not saying FinCom's doing a bad job. I'm just saying that we have to recognize that there are a number of issues and actors at play here. And so what I would like to see is a move to understand if there is a better way or a different way of selecting members of FinCom, and if there's a way for better communications between FinCom and the budgets that they are reviewing. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Court?
Thank you. I appreciate that Dr. Jarius went before I did because he made the point I wanted to make. And it's not about trying to remove the independence of FinCom. It's about making sure that we have more effective communication. And the communication, and I don't want to bring up specific examples because I don't want this to get unpleasant, but the communication has not been collaborative, it has not been relationship building, and it's made this process far more difficult. It's wasted valuable time that we don't have to waste. So I'm concerned about that. And I think that this entire body should be concerned about that as well because we need it to be as functional as possible. The communication is not working. And that's what I saw. If people are concerned about the independence and want to look for another way to do this, we need to look for ways, whether it's a process to improve the communication or not, but we need to look for ways that poison letters aren't getting sent. Okay. I want to make one point of information, and that is I didn't do a deep search, but there are two communities, Littleton and Brookline, who have school committee as an appointing board for their finance committee. Thank you.
Further on the question, Mr. Boskansky, I just want to remind everybody that new points, please. We have a lot ahead of us.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Steve Boksansky, Precinct 4. Congratulations on a successful town meeting so far in this first run, so well done. I'm here to rise in opposition to this motion, this article, and I would urge my fellow town meeting members to do the same. as you may recall, a year ago, we did have two competing articles relative to the Finance Committee. There was a lot of debate, right? We talked a lot about this stuff. We tried to find the right approach. And at the end of the day, one of those articles got sent to the Committee on Government Regulations. And that committee looked at the Article 30, and at the end of the report, if you look at the conclusions of that report, which was in, I think, the warrant from last time we met, they recommended no action. They didn't support nor did they oppose that Article 30 that we were studying. So what does that tell us? That tells us that the committee looked at the appointment process, and they said, we think it's going to be okay. We're not recommending any changes. And so that's the message here tonight. I don't know why we're back at this again. We had a healthy debate last year on this. I feel like we're just going back to the same old problem that I thought we resolved. And I thought we resolved it by saying we're going to do better as a community to work together between the competing interests of Finance Committee and School Committee. It's healthy to have difference of opinion, and we need that to come up with the best final product. So again, I'm going to urge my fellow town meeting members to reject this. I respect the proponent and people who put a lot of time into this stuff. It does take time and effort, and it shows that they do care about our community. But I think a no is the best vote on this article. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name is Milan Chong. I'm in Precinct 4, and also a former chair, current sitting Finance Committee member. I just want to tell you the story and also tell you how I'm gonna vote, but you probably can guess. So, thank you, Ms. Court, for bringing up the fact that the consulting part of one of the budgets was not recommended, and here's the story behind that. And actually, I believe Mr. Julius referenced it as well. In a year when the Finance Committee when I was chair, the committee did a tremendous amount of work and hadn't done this in more than 10 years, brought a structurally balanced budget to town meeting, and there was a lot of clapping. Right after that, town meeting completely reversed it and broke that structurally balanced budget by voting for the very the very discussion we had for additional funding out of free cash for the planning board. And just to give you the history of what exactly happened after that, well, that was considered third priority for the planning board, and Finance Committee looking to try and, the Finance Committee's view is a long-term view, and trying to understand the budget, said if you're telling us it's a third priority project, then we are recommending that it shouldn't be there. Guess what? A year later, that money was turned back by the planning board. Even though the planning board came up and said, we really need it, even though it's our third priority, it got turned back.
Thank you. I don't want to litigate too much from the past.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so let me make my 2 points then. Okay, so the first point is that lots of communication is brought up because sometimes the Finance Committee says no, but collaboration, the Finance Committee does a lot of collaboration discussions, and not everyone might know, but it doesn't mean agreement with the other committees and boards in that discussion. And the last piece is, I heard just before the break that debate is important. If you feel that debate is important, then I hope you vote no on this motion. Thank you. This is Article 39.
Would you guys mind conferring together, because we're going to hear from two more people. Ms. Zaremba?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Stephanie Zaremba, Precinct 2. I have a question through you to maybe the Finance Committee. We're talking about a lot of commentary around this, but I'm looking at the one sentence, and all it does is add 2 people to the appointing group. And I don't see how, short of having the appointing body be all people who don't live in this town, how you could actually have people appointing that had no vested interest in the finance committee and the great work that they do. So I would love to understand how putting two more elected by the people of this town officials, making the process maybe a bit more transparent than it frankly is right now, would impede the ability of the finance. They would still, nothing in the bylaws around them and what they do would change. How would this impede independence relative to how it is today? I don't understand that.
Former chair of the finance committee.
Actually, sure, that's true, but speaking as the chair of the select board, who is one of the current three appointing members and would still remain if we grew it to 5, one thing I would, Mr. Remy, you moved. One thing I would suggest that's different, yes, we are elected, but unlike the planning board and unlike the school committee, we don't get an appropriation on the yellow sheet. We don't get a budget. We don't prepare a budget. We don't go to FinCom and ask for money. So we are an elected body. We are one of the 3 appointing members, but by adding it potentially with 2 other, it could be, the Board of Assessors could be added, or a library trustee, I suppose, could be an elected person and added to that appointing authority, but the select board does not have a line on the yellow sheet.
Second, so we're going to go immediately to a vote to move the question. Yes.
I'm confused. Are the proposed changes only those things in yellow? No. I'm confused. Why are those in yellow and
This is the citizens petition as wrote on the...
Correct. The citizens petition was submitted with the language that's highlighted in yellow, and then when we reviewed it, the original bylaw does not have the word authority or town meeting, that word town meeting. We do not refer to the moderator as the town meeting moderator. So there's extra language in it. So Scribner era, we took it out. That's why it says revised. But what is different is the addition of the chair of the planning and the chair of the school committee. That's what you'd be
Does
voting
that
on.
answer your question?
that does. It's not at all clear to me. I appreciate that.
I think we're ready for a vote, and that's the motion that's on the table. So we're going to use the V-voter because...
Wait, can I just...
No, no.
I'm new.
I know.
I have questions because I can't make a decision because I'm new.
The first time I got up, the motion was called too. So like I feel for you, but this is the rule. These are the rules.
How can us new town meeting members make a decision if we don't have exposure to FinCom? I just have simple questions that I just need clarification. I have no opinion either way, but I feel like I don't have enough information.
I'm sorry, but we have to follow the rules on this one. So we're going to take a vote with your click. 2/3 moves the question. Yes.
Yes.
2/3. Do you want to turn it on? A yes vote is to move the question so that we would end debate and then immediately vote on the question. Well, that's what we're going to find out. This is to move the question. We already ended the debate. If this motion passes, then we go to the main motion and vote on it. But there's no debate on, when someone moves to move the question, there's no debate on that. You just vote. So yeah, there it is. It Passed by one vote. It's a reminder that everybody's vote counts. So now we're going to vote on the question. Oh, God.
Okay.
All right, so bring yours up if you're going to deal with this.
Did you, yeah. Okay, did you close it?
In the meantime,
Okay, so, all right, it was closed at 87 to 39. We have some folks who are reporting that their clicker, okay, did it reverse or did it just not record?
you want to scroll through?
I didn't vote yes.
Anyone else? Okay. All right, hang on, folks. The original call was 87 to 99. And I need the commissioners to pass me over. Who's the other one? The woman that was just up front, that was the second
Tina.
person telling me, what was your name? Tina Cole. Tina Cole.
She voted. She's there. Tina Cole's there.
Do you see yours now?
No, but I didn't vote yes.
All right, how about, Drew, can you re-scroll it, and everyone who's standing here, would you please look and verify before you come to me? Can you scroll it again? Sue Carney? Yes or no?
Put people on the moon. Bill, did we get your vote?
Everybody good? Yep, 92. One more? Yes or no? What is? Okay, so 93.
They're not working.
135. 2/3 of 135. 90. And the yes votes are 93. So it passes.
So the move the vote was successful. Now we're going to vote on the question. Okay. Yep.
Thank you, folks.
Okay, I'm going to reread the motion, and then we're going to proceed to a vote. We're going to use our clickers again. Hopefully they all work. Yes, sir? No, right now the question was moved, so we're going to vote once it was successful, so now we have to proceed to the question, the motion.
So you're voting yes or no on Mrs. Ford's citizen's petition.
Okay, it's moved and seconded to amend Chapter 2. Yes, there was an error on the original motion in I know.
Okay, can I just, well,
The vote is to add 2 people to the body that appoints FinCom members.
Point of privilege, Mr. Moderator.
Yes.
We've been voting on bylaw changes that were formatted a different way. This is also a bylaw change.
Mhm.
Would it be possible for the town clerk to make available the current bylaw so it's more clear to the members what the differences are?
Right now, the difference is the moderator, the chair of FinCom, and the chair of the select board get to appoint people to FinCom. This would add 2 people to that body. So it's pretty simple, even though this is kind of confusing. We're gonna take the vote now. We're not gonna hear from anybody else. With 30 in the affirmative and 98 in the negative, the motion fails. The article fails. We move now to Article 43. It is moved and seconded that the town vote to amend certain subsections of Chapter 6 of the town's general bylaws as set forth in the warrant.
So, 43, chapter 6, is that one? Yes. Yeah. Yes. Great. Mr. Moderator, Select Board, Finance Committee, and Town Meeting members. So we're back. It's the Decennial Review Committee. You got confused by the citizens petition, but this is the stuff we've been working on for you. Hope that woke you up. So, like the others have been doing as we go through these articles, we're going to give you the non-substantive changes where we're hopefully just cleaning up language and ditzels. And then if there's something substantive, we'll spend more time on that. So first, the non-substantive. So we fixed the name of the Department of Revenue. We referred to Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 38, which relates to audits, clarified the advisory role of the Audit Committee. In Sections 2 and 4, we suggest deleting all the funds and the accompanying descriptions if they're not required to be there by state law, not required to be in the bylaws. In Section 6, we added a title so that you could distinguish between the type of revolving funds, again, required by Mass General Law. And so if these non-substantive changes, if Article 43 passes these things, just sort of give greater clarity, they don't change anything in operations. If it's not passed, no big deal. There'll still be some inaccuracies and inconsistencies in our bylaws, but there probably still are some. So the substantive change is the addition in Section 1 of a paragraph requiring description of the undistributed budget item. So we've passed our budget for FY26, but the undistributed is the third largest budget item after education and municipal. And it's made up of these various components: health insurance, unemployment, retirement, workman's comp, energy, and Medicare. And it's all kind of glommed together. So what we are proposing is that the undistributed, which is currently presented only in the aggregate, and all the departments are combined, and we're suggesting that the undistributed be allocated so that you can see which part is for each department. So general government, culture, health, social, etc. And the allocation would be present in the town, in the budget that you see, and it would then follow that it would be in the controller's end of year report. And this is the actual wording of the paragraph that we suggest inserting, and you should have that in your handouts. And it's worth pointing out that the allocation is actually already done by the town manager for the water and sewer and for the recreation funds. And I've got the URL there if you want to go look that up. And it seems pretty clear that having the allocation for education would be helpful to us. You know, the town has to put an end-of-year report that's filed annually to the Mass Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, so it needs to be done there in any case. And just to take you back to water and sewer, I think that was night one with Anthea Brady presenting. Oh, night two, sorry. It goes by so fast. And these are the revenues, you know, for the different sources.
That sarcasm was not appreciated by the chair.
Sorry. Excuse me, Mr. Moderator. I try to use humor, especially late. And then on the expenses, you can see the direct expenses. So it's salaries, personal expenses, and then the actual expenses of the operations. And then the indirect costs that you can see down below, which are things like fringe, sorry, it's hard to be old. I guess I could read here. Pension, health insurance, audit, et cetera, other benefits. And those are what ends up getting rolled up in other cases to the undistributed. So it's done here already. And what we're proposing is that we would have this allocation to all the departments, not just these few. And you'd end up having, you know, not us, it would be other people's work, but you'd have to build a spreadsheet to do that allocation, but then you would just be updating that spreadsheet yearly. And we've been asked, you know, why put it in a bylaw? And, you know, it is true, you know, probably doesn't have to be. And there are lots of things in our bylaws that actually don't have to be in the bylaws, like how you appoint members of a committee. And many committees actually don't have that process in the bylaws. But I think sometimes people like to see it spelled out. And in this case, it would make available to town meeting members the indirect costs of all the departments, and you'd see it on a regular basis in a timely manner. We'd certainly be able to help quantify the per pupil spending annually. It's probably best practice. And I think the most important piece is that it would improve the trust and transparency. And I think that's especially important as we're getting into the era of overrides or potential overrides. And by having it in the bylaw, it really ensures that we all work together to make this process work. You know, it's not subject to changes in future elected officials. So if Article 43 passes this substantive change, I believe it would improve transparency around budget items. Again, especially important if we're preparing for an override. It's easy, in that if we did this, it'd be easy to see the real cost of adding new FTEs or removing them. You'd get the whole loaded cost. It'd be better to see the per pupil spending calculations. And again, the most important being improving the trust and support for town government throughout our community. If it doesn't pass, you know, town meeting members are still going to continue to vote on a large budget item with incomplete information. The financial implications of proposals, either new programs or new FTEs, are really more difficult to prepare and evaluate. Uncertainty remains about the accuracy of our per pupil spending. And really, I think it's a missed opportunity for improved transparency for town meeting members and town residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we get the recommendation of the select board, please?
Okay. I was going to hope it was back up there. There it is. Nice. So the select board is in favor of the first paragraph correcting the Department of Revenue and the appropriate citations to Mass General Law. Also, the addition of Audit Advisory Committee. We did discuss this with the comptroller, who you may not know is actually one of our specific direct reports in the select board. So tasks that we give the comptroller, select board, usually approves. And we did consult with the comptroller on the more substantive change on undistributed. So on the undistributed change, it was unfavorable, unanimous unfavorable, for a couple of reasons. The comptroller reminds us that there are published financial policies and procedures that she follows, that these kinds of changes would be more appropriate in policies and procedures, not in a bylaw, that the enterprise calculation that Ms. Miller showed of the very specific water and sewer enterprise, those breakdowns are required by Mass General Law. That accounting is done specific to be compliant with enterprise fund accounting. And the last piece on per pupil spending is something we intend to take up as part of the state of the town. So we agree it's needed. We've already talked with the school committee and superintendent. And select board will work with finance committee and schools to update that. So hopefully that will provide some additional transparency. But that the specific set of activities The substantive changes in undistributed was unfavorable, and the comptroller certainly would point us to fiscal procedures and policies, and that's a more appropriate place than the bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to remind everybody that the entire article is not going to fit on the screen, so this is just the top of it. It's on 64 of your motion book. FinCom?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Finance Committee unanimously favorable action on this article. Sort of going back to the personnel discussion of what is the total cost of something. And by distributing the undistributed, you're able to actually understand the total cost, whether it be assets, FTEs, employees, et cetera. So we understand and appreciate that maybe a policy is better suited, but we believe this will give town meeting much more transparency if passed. So unanimous favorable action.
Thank you. Mr. Rinaldi, are you representing?
Personal.
Personal. Okay, if any, school committee?
The school committee had addressed all of this particular article with unfavorable action. And then specifically with this part, we concur with what Ms. Pryor was just saying, that it will be addressed under the State of the Town Committee.
Thank you. Now we'll open it up for debate from town meeting members, starting with Mr. Renalia.
Thank you very much, Brian Vernalia, town meeting member, precinct 4. Ms. Pryor actually stole my thunder. I was going to ask if the comptroller had an opinion on this. I won't ask again since we just got it, unless she thinks anything was different from that, from how it was represented. Well, maybe I will. Through you, Mr. Moderator, if the comptroller agrees with how it was represented by Ms. Pryor, and then I would like to make a motion after that.
Town Comptroller Stacey Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you for the question. She represented it fairly complete. I just wanted to mention I have no problem making any allocations. What I would like to see is an allocation method that's somewhere in a policy. I think it's more accurate to have in the financial policies. We have a guide that also needs to be updated that doesn't require town meeting's approval. It's just based on the select board adopting the financial policies and procedures. So I think if we have a very well thought out allocation policy and process, I have zero problem doing it in my financial report, and I have a feeling the town manager wouldn't have a problem following up with a budget analysis. And the budget analysis would be different than actuals because we would know things at the end of the fiscal year. But with that said, I also think, I had a thought, I'm sorry. It's gone. It's late. Oh yeah, it's inflexible to put in a bylaw, and we won't be able to change it based on things that come up and change. We have undistributed changes. There's things come up all the time. Thank you, Paris.
Thank you, Mr. Vernalia.
Thank you. So I would move to amend by striking the second paragraph, the entire paragraph, starting with this town's budget line item currently and ending with Finance Committee and town meeting, striking that entire paragraph.
Second, is there any debate on the amendment? Do we have a select board? This is basically your. Correct. Yeah. Yep. Anyone else? On the amendment? Yeah. Mr. Miller?
Yes, this is on the amendment. It is I'm rising against the amendment. The logic is pretty clear. 2 or 3 years ago, we did a very deep dive in Finance Committee. I'm a Precinct 6 member. We were looking at per pupil spending. And what we discovered was that the methodology for the town does a whole bunch of services for the school department in the background. Those services are allocated for purposes of reporting to the Department of Secondary Education. Those purposes are allocated, those services are allocated to the schools. So for example, check processing, there's a whole bunch of things that the town does in the background for the schools. We could not find how those costs were allocated. What we did find was that 14 or 15 years ago, a former employee of the town made a spreadsheet that we could no longer find that allocated X percent of the treasurer's activities, Y percent of the DPW maintenance. So what we found was that there was no methodology for submitting the dollars that went to DESE for per pupil spending. Now, we have been raising this. We did a complete dive on this. We sent this to town manager, school superintendent 2 or 3 years ago. Nothing's happened. Nothing's changed. There is no methodology for allocating costs incurred by the town for the service of the schools that goes into the per pupil spending. We have been asking for changes. I understand Stacy is willing to do this. That's great, but it hasn't been done. And when things come before town meeting, you are the body that decides. We are the body that decides. And there's been some communication tonight about how there's poor communication between Finance Committee and some of the committees. Part of the poor communication is a failure, an inability to understand what the true cost of something is. That paragraph will go a long way to solving this problem. Finance Committee is not equipped to make these computations itself. We can review the computations of others, and that's really what we're best at, and we can comment on it. But these calculations should take place. They should be automatic. I don't understand why they're not done. If you were in any public company, if you had any government contract, there'd be an overhead calculation. This is basically requiring that we do a simple overhead calculation and allocate overhead. This is a no-brainer to me. This should be, I am against the amendment. This change should be made. It's very important to town meeting.
On the amendment, Mr. McGonigal?
Yes, through the moderator to town council. Town council, you've been whispering something about this language to the select board table. Can you please share that with the whole town meeting?
Sure. Jay Tallerman, Town Council. My concern from a legal perspective isn't whether this is, breaking things out is a good idea or a bad idea. That's the kind of thing that gets discussed in budget policy all the time. My concern is that including it in a bylaw is kind of inconsistent with the legal requirements under law. So there's nothing under law that requires a fixed list of budget line items. Those can change over time. And this even recognizes that the town's budget line item currently labeled as undistributed. There is zero requirement that the town in its yellow sheet, and we choose to do a yellow sheet, that's not required, ever has a line item that says that. In fact, I do town meetings all the time and have done a lot, and the practices from town to town, what they label line items, changes all the time depending upon how they are approaching their budget in the given moment, and it evolves over time. So I get concerned as council of fixing something that under law isn't required to be fixed, and that reduces the flexibility over the time for the town to have their budgeting practices evolved to meet the expectations of the town meeting members. So I have a little bit of a concern about handcuffing the town in terms of the flexibility, and the Finance Committee, frankly, of depriving them of the flexibility that's allowed under Mass General laws.
And through the moderator to the comptroller, I'm curious if she has a response to the comments made by Mr. Miller.
Stacey Ward?
Okay, I'm back. Like I said, we are well aware that the allocation needs to be updated. I review the this very detailed analysis that the school department puts together, and I review based on the allocation that was signed. Well, the allocation percentage that I have, I don't even know if it's signed, but that's what we've been following. It's the superintendent and the town manager agrees upon all of the calculations. Yes, they need to be updated. Do we need to put this in the bylaw? I don't think, in my opinion, no. I think we just come to an agreement to sit down. You guys wrote up an excellent analysis of the areas that were concerning and that should be changed. And we will be addressing that. Andrew and I, Andrew Marin, the finance director of the school, we know we need to change these and make it more transparent and make it more agreed upon, because right now we're just going with the flow. And I know a lot of us go with the flow when you don't have all the time in the world to make these big changes, and it's a big change. And like I said a minute ago, I have no problem updating the comptroller report with some unallocated, with some undistributed allocations. I don't think this is the point, is to allocate it in everybody's budget. I think it's just presentation. So it's really not a heavy lift. It just needs some time to come up with a policy and an allocation process and a document that says this is how we allocate all these things. We have one for the water and sewer enterprise and the recreation enterprise. We have a guide. We have a spreadsheet. We follow this guide, and we have to, because Mass General Law requires that for enterprise fund accounting. And I don't want to confuse this per pupil expenditure analysis with this undistributed budget, because there's so many other things that go into that per pupil expenditure that we wouldn't that have nothing to do with undistributed. There's just other budgets in different departments that the school department actually can capture on their report. So I think we're comparing apples to oranges here. But again, none of us have a problem with giving more information. We just need to have a different method of providing that, and I don't believe the bylaw is appropriate.
So we have a motion to amend that's been seconded. I'm just going to hear from Mr. Bagnani because this is his maiden speech, but the rules of maiden speech
You
is...
have one on the first night. The second speech. Anyway, Parsippany, Precinct 8.
been a long week.
I think we've heard a very clear commitment from the comptroller to update our allocation methodology and work with the finance committee to move this forward. I think that's the right path to update that policy rather than put it in the bylaw. And so with that, I'll move the question.
Is town meeting ready for the question on the amendment? Nods in favor? Okay. So this is the select board amendment to strike the second paragraph.
Brian's.
Dr. Vanalia and the select board in cohesion. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. That passes. The motion, the motion to amend passes. Sure.
Point of order, we also have to be clear about the motion will strike the paragraph.
Yeah.
Right. It's a yes vote.
The yes vote will strike that, and then we'll decide on the amended article if it passes. You got it?
Okay, so we're doing a...
Yeah. Please take out your clickers. So the motion is amended with 88 in favor and 39 against. On the, I'm sorry?
You want to scroll it?
There we go. On the motion as amended. Ms. Sarah?
Motion as amended. Okay. In section 6, we added a word, the suggestion text before us is to add the word departmental. However, the text then says that it's from departments, boards, committees, agendas, and agencies, and I happen to know that there are revolving funds often on topics, aren't there? So I don't think the word departmental is correct. And unless somebody can explain.
Can you say where that is again?
Okay. We are looking at Article 43. On the bottom of the page, there is section 6.
Correct.
They added the word departmental.
Okay. Thank you.
I don't think the word departmental is correct. and I would
Town
like to
Comptroller
know-
would like to speak to that.
I've added that language, that was my recommendation, because there are a whole slew of town and school revolving funds, and there was a lot of confusion about what revolving funds does this actually relate to, and the Department of Revenue has these special departmental revolving funds, and which require a bylaw, which is why they're in there, and so I added that language just to make it clear that we're not talking about any of the other school revolving funds or any other town revolving funds. We're just talking about the departmental revolving funds in accordance with Chapter 44, Section 53E and a half.
Just a follow-up, though, if we're only talking about departmental revolving funds, why does the text then say boards, committees, agendas? I mean, boards would mean maybe school board, and then you're still in the water, you're still.
Well, we do have a revolving fund with the Historical Commission. We have, it's the demolition fund. We have a revolving fund with the Board of Health. It's a flu clinic. Well, it's a clinic fund. It's more than just flu. So there's all sorts of agencies of the town that can request to have one of these funds. But they're called departmental and referred to as that.
Thank you. Mr. Shapiro?
It's Mr. Bears, actually.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Josh Bears, Precinct 7. Through you, Mr. Moderator, to the proponent, I was told that there'll be non-substantive and then the substantive. I kind of ignored the non-substantive, but now I'm confused because we've deleted 2 sections, and I don't remember being told that those were either non-substantive or substantive. Could the proponent explain why we deleted segregation of cemetery trust funds and water revenue account?
Mrs. Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So again, these are non-substantive. We've now eliminated the only substantive one was that addition of the paragraph that's now gone. So these were considered non-substantive, and we removed funds and descriptions of funds that were not required to be in a bylaw. And so that was, again, the comptroller's recommendation to us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are we ready to vote on the question? Yes. It is moved and seconded that the town vote to amend certain subsections of Chapter 6 of the town's general bylaws as set forth in the warrant as amended. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. The ayes have it. So the hour's late. We have a couple consultants here for number 19, the Morocco flood culvert. So with unanimous consent of the body, I'd like to move that up so that we can resolve that issue while he's here and he doesn't have to come back. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Article 19 on. It is moved and seconded that the additional sum of $2,600,000 is appropriated to pay the costs to install additional culverts behind Morocco Elementary School for flood mitigation purposes, including engineering expenses and all other costs incidental and related thereto. That to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Select Board, is authorized to borrow said amount under Chapter 44, Section 7.1 of the General Laws, or under any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes to the town therefore, that the town manager shall be authorized to have oversight of the project, and that in accordance with Section 4-2 of the Town of Winchester Home Rule Charter, the town manager shall have the authority to enter into contracts and approve payments with respect to the project. On behalf of the petitioner, the Select Board, Michael Betancourt.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Town meeting. Before us tonight is Article 19. This is a rendering of the solution to the problem we're going to be talking about tonight. As many of you know, the town developed a flood mitigation program in response to a lot of flooding events in the mid-90s and early 2000s. This is the final project of the flood mitigation plan. In March of 21, the residents supported a Proposition 2.5 debt exclusion override for $9.11 million. When we came back to town meeting in November of 23, town meeting supported increasing the borrowing up to $10.2 million. Just this past summer, we were informed by the MBTA that they had concerns about the culvert design and the process of construction, and they're now requiring us to install a permanent sleeve with grouted annular space between the existing culvert interwalls, and it's going to increase the cost to an additional $2.6 million. It was something that we were unaware of. The project was permitted, it was ready to go, and this rendering here, it's not a fighter pilot, it's actually a cross-section of the culverts. The green arrows are pointing to the culverts that we will be installing, and the red arrows are pointing to what is existing already. And so we will be putting sleeves where those circles are, and that is the function of the project. The MBTA is concerned about the ground giving away and affecting the culvert. Just to give a little overview of the problem, and I just kind of provided the solution. As many of us know, there is a lot of water that comes through Winchester, and as you can see, the bottleneck there, that is what we are trying to solve with the flood mitigation program, and it is been very successful so far, and it is necessary for us in order to remap our whole floodplain area and reduce insurance costs and just protect residents in order to do the project. Here's a little bit of information, some flooding history here. When we talk about a 25-year flood or a 50-year flood, these are all occurrences that the size of it and the scale of the flood, we say will, if it's a larger one, it's every 100 years, a little bit less than it's a 50 years. So it doesn't mean that we can't have a 100-year flood today or a 100-year flood tomorrow. It's just how we characterize these flooding events, and our project is to prepare for the 100-year floods. And again, this is a picture from one of the floods from 2010, Forest Street and Brookside Avenue. So as I just mentioned, the flood mitigation program is developed on a 100-year flood protection, and we are right in the middle of a watershed, and that is what gives the flood mitigation plan its efficacy for us. These are the project locations. You can see from north to south, and the project 10 is towards the top. That is what this is. It's the final project, and all of the ones we completed are in advance that, and they were characterized and moved forward by the need, availability, and funding from the town. And there are other projects, as you can see, that were coordinated with Medford and Woburn as well. As I mentioned, this is the last project that originally began in 1999. What the overall project is putting 2 4-foot by 7 box culverts in, adjacent to the existing culverts, and this will allow a lot of water flow through those culverts that the current culverts cannot handle. Here's some pictures. Some people may or may not be familiar with some of these floods. This is the back of Morocco School. As you can imagine, before we look at all into rebuilding a school in that area or renovating it, this is a problem that needs to be solved. Here's some other photos that people may or may not remember. You can see the post office. The water is right up to the steps. Shore Road, Manchester Road, and Skillings. And here's some actual residences, the interior Tufts Road, where a lot of the flooding was at that point. Here's Cross Street, over by the Cross Street Bridge, a rare photo of without a truck hitting that bridge, but it's there, and Forest Street and Brookside Avenue. And to also give you a sense, what an additional problem here is increased stormwater runoff. So more impervious surfaces, more houses, less land to absorb water, absorb the water, and more severe storms that we're seeing. And when you look here, you can see the 100-year floodplain that's after the completion of the flood mitigation program in purple, and the light blue is in the that's the current 100-year floodplain. So you can see the amount of area that will be preserved from this project being finalized. And here is another picture here of the buildings that will be removed from the 100-year floodplain in green, and the buildings with reduced floodplain elevation in yellow. So quite impactful. 43 buildings removed from the floodplain and reduced flood elevation in 29. And you do see Morocco School there, and you see the high school there too. One of the big issues that we've been confronting as we've been modeling the need for these individual culverts and bridges and work that we've been doing is climate change. And what we've been seeing in the region is a lot more impact, and that is what we're preparing for. And as I mentioned before, as the design of the Morocco School progresses in the coming years, it's a problem that we need to solve. And I would be remiss if I did not mention the amount of work and effort that Jimmy Johnson, former select board member, former capital planning town meeting member, did on this project. And it is really by his force of nature that this project happened. Over that long period of time, he was in it from the beginning, and I regret that he's not here to see it through its final stages. This is really the gold standard of a public works project from our perspective, something that takes a long time. It pulls a lot of families out of a very threatening area in town, and it's one of those projects that it's not glitzy or glamorous or sexy. It's something that will preserve the town for many years to come. Hundreds of cars will be driving over these areas for generations. And I just wanted to acknowledge Mr. Johnson's work on this. I looked forward to seeing him when the project was finalized, and but it's a testament to his commitment and to the success of good government and his participation in it. I don't say that to pull heartstrings. I'm confident that the town meeting will support this article as it has for many years, and I think we're ready for this project to be completed, and this is the final stage of it. I know I told you that last time, but this really is it. So, thank you, town meeting.
So this is a select board article. We assume that you guys support it. Absolutely. FinCom in 10 words or less.
I don't know if I can guarantee that.
Oh, you're already over. So.
Just the Finance Committee unanimously supports this article. I just want to take a moment, 2 seconds, just to point out this is another unexpected cost. So $2.6 million that we need to come up with that we're borrowing. If we lose our AAA bond rating, this borrowing becomes more expensive. If we use free cash, this is about 15% less of our free cash amount. So just, this is what's happening. So I just want to point that out, but unanimously support the article.
Planning board? Capital planning?
I can beat that. On behalf of capital planning, we unanimously recommend favorable action.
Thank you. School committee?
The school committee recommended unanimously favorable action.
EFPBC from the back? I tried.
You won't be surprised the EFPBC unanimously recommends favorable action. Mr. Betancourt did a nice job describing all the reasons why as it pertains to the new Morocco and potentially reducing the elevation of the 100-year floodplain by between 3 and 4 feet. I will just remind you all from our presentation under Article 16 on the opening night of town meeting that while this is sort of the last piece, to Mr. Betancourt's point, you actually have already pre-funded the very last piece. So if you support this tonight, don't forget you've already funded $175,000 for the remapping under motion for Article 16. So the moment this work is done, management will then apply to FEMA and get that remapping going, and that will be necessary before we do anything of substance at Morocco. Thank you.
Any town meeting members ready to ask a question?
Vince Dixon, Precinct 3. I spent 4 years on the Finance Committee, and part of that was talking about the flood issues in town. Very important set of issues. This is a neighborhood that deserves this work, and the work should be done, and the additional work clearly should be done. However, I would point out that the T had signed off on the project before, and they come forward as a state agency to require additional work. And it seems to me that we should separately, once this is approved and we go forward, seek some determination as to whether this is an unfunded mandate, because the T really missed something here. And if this was a project that was done as a package to begin with, perhaps the package could have been done at lower cost and certainly would have been done in a better and more organized way. This is a pattern that we've had. The T is certainly not a saint any more than us, but just showing up with $2.6 million seems to me maybe our legislative delegation could seek some partial compensation for this, because this work does need to be done and should have been part of the original project. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson.
So I can see this bridge from my house, or the culvert. So I have two questions. One, what's the expenditure against the original appropriation, the expenditure to date? And my second question is, in putting a round culvert in the square culverts, the two culverts there, how much is the capacity of those culverts reduced? It looks to me like they're each reduced about 1/3. And does that change the performance of the overall plan with the two culverts we're adding and the two culverts we're reducing the size of?
An engineer still here? Does anybody have an answer for that?
Yes, he does, right here, the engineer.
Okay. Here comes the consultant.
Luke Boucher from VHB. To answer that question about the pipe capacity, we had some additional pipe capacity in those 8-foot diameter supplemental culverts that we were installing. So the installation of the sleeves and the filling of the annular space in the existing rectangular box culverts, we reran the analysis, and we're not increasing the upstream flood elevation with this new configuration. I'm sorry if I missed the other part of the question.
The other question was, how much has been expended of the original appropriation?
I don't have that information on hand, sir.
We're working on that. Any other town meeting members? Mr. Wilson, do you need that information to be able to vote? No. It's in the comptroller report from March. Okay. I believe town meeting is ready for the question as previously read into the record. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Declared unanimous, meeting the 2/3 requirement. We proceed now to Article 31. It is moved and seconded that the town approve Article 31 as printed in the warrant. On behalf of the petitioner, Select Board Member Bill McGonigal.
Good evening. As we're getting the slides put up here, Article 31 is a article from the Select Board asking you to give us the authority to negotiate a mitigation easement as it relates to 10 Converse Place. That is not 10 Converse Place. That is
a
a cheetah.
native animal?
That is the article. So some quick background here. 10 Converse Place, the architectural jewel of downtown Winchester, your favorite cell phone tower and mine. That's it right there. We want to do something better with it. And I say we, where I'm talking about the whole town. I think that's agreed upon. Getting development done is very difficult, especially when you're dealing with areas that are near wetlands, riverbanks, and other things that require environmental protection. That's what's happening here. Now, before I move on, I want to make something very clear. We are not here to vote on whether or not to approve a certain project. This is just one piece of a larger effort. We have a long way to go down the road still before we get to what will hopefully be a much better structure, building, addition to our town. This includes the permit application resubmission or reconsideration process, which has to do with a vote the planning board just took earlier this week. I'm sure the planning board will tell you a little bit more about that. We also have to resolve an appeal, a denial, which is in land court and concerns the Conservation Commission. We also have to reserve an appeal with the DEP. We have to resolve issues related to Article 97 of the Massachusetts General Laws, which deal with conservation issues. And we also have to work on the MEPA mitigation plan approval. So there are lots of things that are going to happen before anything gets built there. But for something to be built there, it's not guaranteed, but it is very likely that we are going to need a mitigation easement. What is that? Well, because the 10 Converse Place parcel is so close to Mill Pond, it falls within certain environmental protections, which means if you build upon as yet undisturbed land, you have to mitigate it somewhere else. And if you mitigate it on site, you get to do a 1-to-1 ratio of fixing up some land for the land that you're building upon. But if you can't do it on site and you have to go off site, you have to do a 2-to-1 ratio there. Now, what I have up here is just an example. These are the plans that were submitted for potential approval by the planning board, which were alterations to what was originally approved a couple years ago. There was a developer, they had a plan, it got a special permit. That developer had some financial troubles. A new developer has stepped in. They were hoping to make some tweaks to make the plan financially viable for them. Those tweaks were more material, more substantial than could be allowed to just be administratively approved. And so they were sent back for further review, or maybe they'll come forward with additional changes to their plans. We really don't know. So this is an example, and in full transparency, we don't know how much square footage or how much mitigation might be necessary, because that is based upon the footprint of the project. And right now, we don't know what the footprint of the project is going to be. But we know it's likely that they're going to need some mitigation. And we want to be ready to help them do that if it's needed, because we want to signal to people that we are a town that wants to develop, we are a town that wants to take care of our resources, and we are a town that wants to make sure that we're working together hand in hand cooperatively with those sorts of interests and those sorts of developers. So with this example, depending on how big the footprint is, we would be looking to negotiate an easement in the Mill Pond area to make up for the land that's being disturbed from the potential construction. Again, these are some examples that came in from the current developer related to their recent plans. And you can see in yellow some of the square footage, some of the area where we would be negotiating a potential easement, where they would come in, and so that they could build their land, build their project, have their footprint, we'd be fixing up some portion of this land that you might see highlighted in yellow. Now again, full transparency, we don't know how much, and we don't know exactly where we'd want to do this yet, but we want to be ready, willing, and hopefully with your support, able to do that so we can move this project along. Keep in mind, town meeting only meets twice a year. We do need your authority to do this. We hope that you guys trust us to do it well. There's a chance we don't need this at all, but we want to be prepared to make this happen when we see a plan that gets through the process, gets all the other approvals. We don't want them held up because of us trying to get this mitigation easement done. So I respect there will probably be some questions about how much more detail should we have before we proceed with this. That is a big unknown. We respect that, but that's always going to be the case. We're not going to have every single thing buttoned up before we move forward. We want to move forward responsibly. We want to move forward with your blessing, and we ask you therefore to vote yes so that we can help steer, guide, and make sure 10 Converse Place gets developed to the best it possibly can, respecting all of our interests and respecting the natural habitat and wildlife that currently exists around Mill Pond. Thank you.
Thank you. I know this is a select board article. Can we get the vote in favor? 5-0. Planning committee, planning board.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can I just ask a question first to the select board?
Not yet.
Okay.
So I'm back, but this time from the planning board, not from the capital planning committee. And on behalf of the planning board, I'd like to make a brief statement about 10 Converse Place. The planning board, as you heard, approved a special permit for 10 Converse Place in 2022. In 2025, the board received a request from a new developer to use the 2022 permit with modifications, as they stated that the approved permit is unfeasible without these modifications. The proposed modifications included an increase in building height, an increase in the number of floors, and changes in the amount and location of parking, the amount and location of commercial space, the number of residential units, the configuration of the work-live units, and the rainwater retention system. We held a public hearing on April 1st, 15th, and May 6th. We unanimously found that the proposed changes were significant and would require a resubmission of an application for a special permit. We further voted unanimous unfavorable action on Article 31. We believe it's premature to be designating areas for potential remediation for a project of undefined scope. If town meeting members or others have specific questions for the planning board regarding 10 Converse Place, they have to be brought to our meetings out of fairness both to the applicant and other interested parties. So if questions come, I'll do my best, but I can't, it's hard to talk about the future. These things have to be discussed in public hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. On behalf of the Conservation Committee, David Miller. Conservation Commission, excuse me.
David Miller, representing the Conservation Commission. Read a brief statement. We have not taken a favorable or unfavorable position. This is just information for you to accommodate as you consider your vote. The original Converse Place project was denied under the Wetlands Protection Act and the Winchester Wetlands Bylaw. Different reasons for each denial, but it was denied in each case because it did not meet the legal requirements to be approved under either law. The denial of the original project under the Wetlands Protection Act remains in a denied status with an appeal outstanding at the DEP, Environmental Protection. The denial under the town's Wetlands Bylaw is now in Superior Land Court and on hold, stayed. So why is this article in front of you now? The entire site is within legally defined riverfront. Under the Wetlands Protection Act, there are multiple regulations that detail how a building project can proceed in the riverfront. The highest level requirement is that the project must leave the riverfront in better shape as riverfront in the sense of the multiple wetland values that riverfront provides, as defined under the Wetlands Protection Act and its role as a river and a wetland. To this end, there is a requirement under the Wetlands Protection Act that the area consumed by the building footprint must be mitigated by a restoration effort, and Mr. McGonigal made reference to this, restoring riverfront to riverfront. Simply put, the footprint of the original building was too big. There was not enough room on their own site to do the required riverfront mitigation. This was a reason that the building was denied, and this is a square footage discussion, again, as Mr. McGonigal made reference to. The new development group proposes keeping that same building footprint, and so the building remains too big, again. However, this time it is recognized as being too big, and they propose a solution, gain access to town land and use the square footage to solve their mitigation problem. So Winchester is being asked to provide town land to a developer whose large building, which they themselves designed, is unable to meet the requirements of building in the riverfront. Now, if the building were smaller, the problems we are discussing would disappear immediately. The developer has offered the narrative that only a building this size works financially in this location. So it seems rational from a process perspective that before we give over this request for town land based on this reason, we should ask for an economic analysis alternative. Their financial narrative should be validated or challenged through the peer review process, a step available to both the Planning Board and the Concom. Actually, it is required under the Wetlands Protection Act. Also, the land that is being considered to address the developer's square footage problem is not only town land, but also legally defined parkland. This means it is a state resource covered by Article 97 of the state constitution and may very likely require approval by the state legislature to be used in this fashion. Lastly, while not fully germane to the article, the Concom's separate denial of the original project under the Winchester Wetlands Bylaw was appealed to Superior Land Court, where it remains stayed. Should the building proceed to approval under the state's WPA, Wetlands Protection Act, the building will nonetheless remain denied under the town bylaw, and the court case will then need to proceed to resolution. The Concom believes that its denial was well-reasoned and not arbitrary nor capricious, and so has a good chance of prevailing. That's it.
Thank you. Ms. McCarthy, is this a question for the Select Board, or are you speaking on behalf of the Historical Commission?
First on the Historical Commission.
Okay.
Michelle McCarthy, Historical Commission, also Precinct 7. The Historical Commission unanimously voted against this, primarily because it is on our historic downtown. This would have a negative impact on that. I do really think it's unfair to town meeting members for a photo not to be shown of what could be built there. I think if people realized how massive this building was, they would understand the negative impact on our downtown, our historic downtown. And if we do really care about our resources, our beautiful town center, our National Register town center, and the pond all around it, which is on the National Register, should be preserved, in my opinion. I would like just to say that DEP has also, not decided if it's even okay to build on the space at all. And I think that conceding control of land that Winchester owns, especially during, as FinCom would say, a budget crisis, to just be conceding land to a private developer, I think is extremely unfair. I know that a lot of people might want to speak, but I think we should consider postponing this. I just don't think that town meeting has enough information about this right now, and I think there's a lot of things that could be built there. I'm not saying we can't build something there. I think this is too big, and I think that we could do something great for all of the residents in Winchester on that land. Thank you.
Just to clarify, this is a motion on the easement, not on the approval of the project, but you mentioned IP. Do you want to make a motion?
I make a motion to indefinitely postpone Article 31.
A second. Is there any debate? Ms. They're pretty much the same, and we could vote on the motion, or we could vote on the IP. It would have the same effect. Mr. Nixon?
Before we vote to IP, I wondered if the proponent, Mr. McGonigal, could just clarify. He had a slide with some yellow areas around the pond, and he said, we may have to fix these up. I'm not sure what that means to architects or engineers, but could you explain sort of in layman's terms what that means? Because I interpret that all as sort of wetland or water bordering areas anyway. So could you help us understand what could actually happen in those yellow hatched areas when you say fix them up? What does that mean?
I might not be the best person to answer this. Mr. Miller might be the better one to answer this, actually. But my understanding is it could be a wide range of activities that could be done. Restoring the waterfront, making sure it's native species instead of in non-native species or invasive species there. That would, I imagine, be all part of the negotiation in terms of getting the mitigation easement with the developer. And these are highlighted as potential areas where that could happen, and each area would have its own needs and options. And so all of that would have to be weighed and debated and considered before coming to a final resolution. And again, with full transparency, until we know the final square footage of what is going to be approved here, we don't know how much is going to be necessary, and that is going to determine also where we'd be looking to do a mitigation easement. So again, I respect that there are a variety of unknowns here. There is one set of plans that has been permitted. It is unlikely that those will go forward after the recent planning board vote or anything close to them. We just want to be ready, and that's where we are.
Thank you. Mr. Moderator, my second part question, which I think is important, is the article as it's proposed is to give the board the authority to lease or convey an easement. But then it goes on to say for the purpose of conducting wetland remediation. So my question is, with respect to any work that might be done, if 31 should pass, what standing does the Conservation Commission have in defining what the nature of the work is in these yellow areas? In other words, is 31 simply limited to your ability to make a conveyance? Or does it include determination of the work that would be done in the yellow area? I see town council has popped up. I see these as sort of two separate issues that are interrelated.
Yes, I'm going to defer to town council, and we'll do that.
Yeah, I don't want to stray too far from the motion to indefinitely postpone, but it's actually a slightly tricky question. All that work on the town land is not part of the original application to the Conservation Commission, but the appeal to DEP, when they issue, if they issue a superseding order, kind of superseding the Conservation Commission's, their position is that under the State Wetlands Protection Act, that they can issue approvals for this additional work on this additional land. However, they can't do anything with respect to the local wetland bylaw. So for all of that work, whether it's removal of invasive species or shoring up the banks or whatever, they will have to do some additional permitting before the Conservation Commission, which will have the entire rights that it has under the local bylaw under that process.
Thank you.
Are you good? Ms. Sullivan?
Maura Sullivan, Precinct 1. As you've heard, the Planning Board has voted unanimous unfavorable action on Article 31, and this is because the article is premature. There's currently no project before the Planning Board. The 2022 project is not viable, and the 2025 proposal is a new design that would need to start over with a new special permit review. So at this point, we don't know if we'll ever need to mitigate the land around Mill Pond for a 10 Converse development. It's possible that a new project could be built on the footprint of the existing building in the parking lot. This concept has never been explored. But town meeting is not being asked to decide what gets built at 10 Converse. Tonight, we're concerned only with whether the Select Board should be given the extremely broad power to lease or convey an easement in public land that the public really cares about, the land all around Mill Pond. This includes a tri-community greenway bike path, Sandy's Island, and the land along Mystic Valley Parkway. But town meeting has not been given any information about the easement or the remediation. What are the terms of the easement? Who would we be leasing or conveying the land to? For how long? What would the third party be allowed to do with the land? Does the land even need remediation? The town's already spent money improving the land around Mill Pond. Moreover, the land is subject to Article 97 of the state constitution, and any disposition of any interest in the land, including easements, must follow very specific procedural steps. None of these steps has been taken, and we don't know if they'll be successful. This is a moment of reset. The applicant does not yet own the property. Whoever buys it is free to come up with a new proposal which hopefully better meets the town's goals of having a mixed-use development that complements our center business district. We have a duty to make sure we tread very carefully when it comes to the disposition of public land, especially when the primary motivation is to assist a private developer. There'll be plenty of time down the road to consider an easement if we need to. This would also give more time for public engagement concerning this public land in the very heart of our town center. I was going to urge town meeting to vote no on Article 31, but I urge you to vote to indefinitely postpone. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't want to stray too far from that motion, so Mr. Jurius, is it?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Do you have Jurius, Precinct 8?
No, we have to do the IP first.
I have a couple of questions on the language. So through you to the proponent, I'd like to know why the word lease is in there. In particular, why can't we simply grant a temporary easement? And also, is it a requirement that the mitigation occur on lands in proximity to the original parcel? So for instance, this is limited to parcels 9 through 18 around Mill Pond, but it's possible that there is better areas for mitigation on other wetlands in town, and this might be.
Yeah, I grant that point of order. That doesn't have anything to do with the IP. So we're going to take the vote on the IP. And
Excuse me, Mr. Moderator, why is this out of order?
because we have a motion to IP, you're bringing new issues.
But in
forward.
order for me to determine whether I want to vote for indefinite postponement, I would like to have some answers to these questions.
But the motion's on the table, so we'd like to dispense of that first.
I just have a procedural question about the motion to postpone.
Uh-huh.
So the first session of town meeting, we voted to, I can't remember, it was to postpone to a date certain, or was it to table? It was, it was so that, like, so if you have if we have a zoning article and we indefinitely postpone, they can't come back in front of us for 2 years. What is the time frame for them to come back in front of us on this motion if we indefinitely postpone?
There's no barrier. There's no time barrier.
So
for
he
an
could come
article.
back, they could come back in the fall?
Correct.
The IP, the threshold is 50%. The main article requires a 2/3 vote, just so everybody's aware. Can we vote on the IP? All right, sensing that town meeting's ready for the question, the motion is to indefinitely postpone Article 31. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries by 2/3. Oh, no, sorry, the simple majority on that.
My mistake.
Okay, in light of the items being referred to, so we're going to return to the bylaws. We have 3 bylaws left and 1 Article 56. Please don't leave. We might need your votes. I know the hour's late, but we can complete the work tonight. In light of the items being referred to the committee, we've already re-engaged the Committee on Government Regulations. The moderator would entertain a motion to refer the remaining Articles 46, 49, and 48 to committee. So moved. And a second? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. The motion carries. Not from the committee, though. So Article 56, do you have language on that? We don't have any. So we don't have any motions to create any new committees. Does anybody want to create a new committee? This is the last thing stopping us from going home and eating cannolis in the...
Robert's rules. So, Karen Conley, Precinct 3. Let's give this one a shot. I would move to create a committee that will evaluate Robert's Rules of Orders and town meeting time and recommend to Winchester's town meeting which should be used in our town meeting. The committee would be comprised of the current town moderator, town attorney, at least 1 previous town moderator, a representative of the select board, the town clerk or designee, and 2 current town meeting members who are appointed by the town manager. Now, I know that's a lot, and if somebody sees a way to make this shorter, I'm simply asking for some guidance before we go forth this summer and try to come back to you in the fall between whether we're talking town meeting time or Robert's Rules.
Second the motion. Is there any debate? I told my wife that I can't volunteer for anything else, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to sit on that. But we have a motion that's been seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. So the motion carries. Mr. Miller.
Just a question of clarification. So as I guess I would be called the proponent for Article 49. I'm not quite sure what just happened.
We referred it to the committee. It's going to be further studied.
And
then-
why is that a good outcome?
Because it's 10:30 and
But does that mean next week or that means some point in the future?
that means in the fall town meeting or whenever the Committee on Government Relations brings it back. Or we could come back next Thursday.
I'm out of town next Thursday. That's the truth. Is the Committee on Government Regulations okay with that outcome?
Your commission can bring forth its own bylaw and we can vote on that definitively in the fall.
But is this merely a matter of we've run out of time? Is that the entire reason, or is there something more substantial to it?
Should we put it to the town meeting?
All right. Is
So
there
I
any
need a motion to adjourn and dissolve. Motion to adjourn and dissolve. Second. All those in favor? So moved. Thank you, everyone. See you in the fall.
Good evening once again, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Alan Iden, and what you have just seen is Winchester's fourth and final session of Spring 2025 town meeting. So a lot of this town meeting time was absorbed about changing rules and regulations, a lot of discussion over it, not necessarily arguments. I'm not going to go too deeply into them because you could look at your warrant. It's not going to mean a lot to say this word got changed or that word got changed. You'd have to look at your warrant. But let me see we can recap what did happen tonight. We started out with Article 33 from the report from the Personnel Board, which is normally one of the final reports of town meeting. It was pulled ahead. Essentially, they were looking for $236,000 to fund raises that they have recommended for funding for union contracts that are not settled but would have to be paid retroactively. And we heard that most non-union personnel would get a 2.5% raise. That was passed. A housekeeping article, Article 36, to transfer $1.6 million to reduce the tax levy was passed. Then we went on to these government regulations, and what we heard from the Committee on Government Regulations that had proposed these many articles was they were essentially updating the town's bylaws to conform to current practices that were already being done. One of them is that they want the town meeting warrant and motion book to be on the town's website 13 days before town meeting. Again, giving the residents and the town meeting members adequate time to study them. A lot of the discussion tonight was something called town meeting time. Town meeting time is a set of rules and regulations about how town meetings are to be conducted. We don't currently do that. We conduct our town meetings under what they call Robert's rules. We heard that the difference between them is about 5%. Many towns have already gone to town meeting time. But we heard comments that it was difficult to find printed copies of it and that town meeting members had not had a chance to study them. A town meeting member said it was very confusing. A town council said as a moderator himself, said most town meeting members would not notice the difference after a few meetings. But there was a suggestion that every town meeting member should get a copy. Our former town meeting moderator, was opposed to the change, as she posted in an email and I believe on some social media. So this is referred back to the Committee on Government Regulations for presentation to the fall town meeting. In other words, town meeting time was not adopted. There was some discussion of footnotes, and I guess there was some problems with footnotes in being referred to in wrong sections. Our town clerk said those would be corrected in the final version. That failed because of those confusions over the town, over footnotes. There were some additional rules on town meetings that also failed. A rule of limiting speakers on town meeting from 5 minutes to 3 minutes apparently followed town meeting time, but since we aren't following that, that motion was stricken from the record. There was substantial discussion on Article 39, which was a proposal to change how members of the Finance Committee are appointed. Currently, Finance Committee members are appointed by the moderator, the chair of the Select Board, and the chair of the Finance Committee. This would add a couple of other committees and make appointments from the chairs of the Select Board, the School Committee, the Planning Board, and the Finance Committee. So adding the School Committee and the Planning Board. It's a citizen's petition. The proponent said it would create a more collaborative process. The Finance Committee came out strongly opposed to it. They said this is not the solution, and it doesn't preserve the independence of the Finance Committee. No other towns, they said, select Finance Committee this way. And he commented that the Finance Committee does not make rules. The Finance Committee is purely an advisory committee, and that this would erode the independence of the Finance Committee because it would make them subject to influence by these other chair boards. The question got moved, and overall it failed. So no change to the appointment of Finance Committee members. Back to Article 43 for government regulations. There was cleaning up some wording in accounting regulations. There was a discussion of allocating undistributed funds that usually come at the end of town meetings, such as in, insurance and things like that, and are just spread out over the whole town government. This was to to assign them to each department instead of a lump sum. The Select Board opposed because some breakdowns are required by state law. There was an amendment to strike this undistributed section, which passed, and the rest of the article did pass, Article 43. Article 19 was for $2.6 million for additional funds for the Morocco culvert. So we heard that this Morocco culvert is the final piece of the flood mitigation projects that have been going forward for over a decade. Apparently this culvert passes under the railroad tracks. The MBTA had concerns of weakening their weakening where the culvert weakening the tracks, the support of the tracks where it passes, where this culvert passes under the tracks. So this was $2.6 million to install some additional sleeves under it, sort of an unanticipated part of the project. There was discussion, we heard from the Select Board that Mr. Betancourt wanted to pay tribute to the late Jim Johnson, who just passed away a few weeks ago, who had spent many, many years of working on this project, and it's very unfortunate that he is not here to see this final phase of these decade-long projects to solve the flooding problem in Winchester Center. Tribute to Mr. Johnson. And he said that this will remove many residents from the 100-year floodplain and save them a lot of money in insurance costs. It was passed unanimously. That $2.6 million was going to be borrowed. 31 was to allow the Select Board to convey certain easements around the mill pond for wetland remediation of a potential project at Converse Place. The project that was proposed a couple of years ago has been withdrawn. The proponent apparently had financial issues, so there's new projects that are being proposed. They've got a long way to go for planning board and other approvals, but this was to allow the Select Board to offer easements around the pond or possibly in other sections of the town upon recommendations of the Conservation Commission. The town meeting felt that this was too early in the process because there really has not been concrete proposals for this project, so it was indefinitely postponed. Articles 26, 49, and 48 were referred back to the Government Regulations Committee to come back this fall. And in an unusual move, usually Article 56, the last article, which is to dissolve committees or form committees, usually just gets passed as is. Karen Conley got up and urged the formation of a committee to study Robert's rules versus town meeting time. And she actually had very details which I couldn't get down because she read them off so fast. But to form a committee to study this and come up with recommendations and also details on the exact differences between the two projects and bring them to fall town meeting, passed unanimously. And that was it. That was the end of spring town meeting here, spring 2025 town meeting here at Winchester High School. It's been our pleasure and our honor here at WinCam to bring this to you, and we hope you'll stay tuned. We have, this is May, we have ENCA coming up, ENCA Fair coming up in a couple of weeks, and Town Day at the beginning of June, so we'll probably see you out at one or both of those events. So for all of us here at WinCam, I'm Alan Iden. Thank you for watching. Have a great night.